Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Naruto is removed from the orphanage and finds Sage of Six Paths Tomb Harem. Before I start, please support for more amazing content, and do consider subscribing to my channel and share this video with your friends. This is written by Psudocode Samurai and link in description and support writer. Let's start the video. Chapter 1, A Place for Everything. So it is said of Xandri, first among the high queens of Dishret, last among the rulers of Dishret, she stood alone against the great beast of calamity, that she fell defending the people. May her reign continue for all eternity in the next life. Translated from the hieroglyphics at the Pillar of Remembrance. He couldn't really remember when it was he had started coming here. He knew it had been hot, that was about it. The scorching heat of the summer, noonday sun was not something to be underestimated when one lived in fire country. He remembered searching everywhere. At this time of the day the matron didn't let any of the children back into the orphanage, believing that they needed that time out to play and get some good exercise. It also helped to keep any of the kids from getting too sad at their rather paltry living conditions. The fact was a simple one: when recovering from war and the devastation that a demon will bring to your town, funding an orphanage was hardly the first place that the money was sent. Still, it was a nice enough existence. While most of the children avoided him, usually at the behest of the other workers at the large, though crumbling, home, the matron was always kind to him. He had asked the old man that would visit him from time to time why it was that she was always so nice when the others would ignore him or push him away. He had remembered him smiling a little sadly before saying that the matron was once something called a wet nurse, that she had worked for the Kages for years, helping to rear his own sons when they had been small, and now she ran the orphanage. It was on this day, his desperate search for a shady spot that was not taken up by the large dogs the tattooed people would have, or the ones that would always look at the clouds, that he had happened upon a rather strange place not too far out of the village and the surrounding forests, that were still contained by the outer walls of the growing city. The odd little place was surrounded by a low, rotting fence that looked as though that, at one point, it had been pretty, more for look than effect. Pushing aside a rotting bit of bamboo, he stepped cautiously inside and was almost instantly swallowed up by overgrown grass and weeds. A boy of no more than 6, he couldn't hope to be taller than these things. Smiling at how much cooler he was feeling already, he had moved deeper into the odd grounds and promptly fell face first to the ground, his tattered sandals catching on something at his feet. Looking closer, and still needing to part the grasses so he could better see, he saw what looked like a large stone, the worn kanji on it unreadable for a number of reasons, first of which being that he couldn't read. He remembered idly cursing the stone before he rose once more and ambled deeper in, his eyes barely spotting what looked like the top of a stone structure through the almost suffocating foliage. As he moved in, careful to dodge around the other stones that seemed laid out in something of a pattern, he came to the base of the structure, his eyes widening in shock at what lay before him. The whole of the thing was large if worn. Its yellowed and rough stone showing that it was at one point a thing of beauty, water-worn and windswept effigies all but lost to time. However, it was the large door, flanked by odd statues that had caught his eye. Each of the large, man-looking stone sculptures were standing tall, arms before them in what looked to be, at one point, the pose for holding something quite large. The faces of the men were long washed away, but the odd hoods they seemed to have worn were still somewhat there, though he could see where they had been broken before being further weathered. Putting them aside for the moment, he peered deeper inside the doorway and smiled to himself. It was dark, cool, hidden from sight and hard to find. Perfect clubhouse. Casting one last look about the area, a brilliant smile lighting up his whisker-marked face, he dashed inside, almost instantly being engulfed in darkness and a comforting cool, slightly damp air. Letting out a sigh of contentment, he looked around the darkened room and saw that he couldn't see very deep inside at first, his eyes slow to adapt as he moved closer to the walls, his little hands coming up to run along the stone as a guide. Adorning the wall in many neat columns were odd pictures, most painted in badly faded inks and flaking stone inlay. Some images were of birds, others of people, some looked like plants or other animals or odd symbols. It was all more than a little strange for the young blonde. Slowly he moved deeper, this time being a bit more careful of the walls. The matron had always said, if it looked old, don't touch. Slipping his hands into hole-ridden pockets, he moved closer to a large picture that seemed to be in far better shape. It still had a lot of the same images on it, but he could at least tell that it was some kind of a battle. He saw men with odd hats and long, pointy sticks on horse-drawn carriages, rows and rows of people with odd clothing and bizarre things in their hands. The things were big when compared to the people, almost as large as they were in some cases. The parts they were holding in two hands were almost as long as their arms, with a strangely shaped, curved second half to them, kinda like the hooked knives that the farmers used, but they looked like they were holding them facing the wrong way. Moving a little further, he saw those same images. This time they looked to be fighting some strange creature. The thing was massive and darkly colored, something he couldn't hope to make out in the dim light, but what he did see was that it had 10 weird little tail things coming off of it. The images showed the men swinging the odd things, cutting pieces off of the monster as the ones in the carriages charged and stabbed at the legs. Another picture showed row after row of men with strangely curved-looking sticks with strings in their hands, sticks that could fire other pointy sticks. Pictures showed a huge number of the pointy sticks raining down on the beast. He couldn't remember being more excited in his life. Only the matron would read him stories, and even then she only told boring ones about dogs or living cookies. Right here before him was a giant picture book showing people fighting a real monster. Hardly able to keep his steps steady, he ran to the next picture and gasped. This picture showed the monster again, this time next to a bunch of strange-looking triangles and other buildings, some like the big tower in the middle of the village, only pointier, others like the faces on the mountain. The thing that was scary was he saw just how big the creature was compared to these buildings, and how small the people were next to them. The next picture showed the huge thing with its tails pointing all over, and a ball of fire coming from its mouth, destroying the buildings and killing the people. Naruto felt a flash of anger and sadness wash over him. Was this what these stories were like? They were supposed to be heroes beating the monsters, but all these people were dying. With a slight pout, he moved up to the next picture and gasped. There, standing on top of one of the weird, Hokage mountain-like buildings, was a really pretty woman, pretty like that purple-haired girl he had seen going to the academy, and her red-eyed friend. This one looked like she had long black hair, a strange thing on her head like some of the other people on the carriages, but hers was even fancier. It looked to wrap around the back of her head and kinda fan out, and covered the top of her head completely, like when some of the kids would put pots on their heads and played samurai. She was wearing what looked like a long, white dress like the people with the white eyes would wear. In one hand was a long stick with a snake on it, and her other hand had a big claw. She was standing on top of the mountain alone, all the other people hiding behind her as the monster came at her. That was the end. It was too dark to see more. The young blonde wanted to scream, it wasn't fair. How did it end? He'd never heard of a pretty lady being the hero in a story, now he found one and he couldn't find out what happened. This is the worst day ever. Kicking at the dust at his feet, Naruto slowly started making his way back towards the entrance, the doorway so bright that it was hurting his eyes. Squinting at the sudden pain, his foot caught something, making him spill onto the floor and let out a yelp as he scraped his knee. Rubbing the damaged limb vigorously, he glared at what he had tripped on. His eyes widened. A hall. Best clubhouse ever. With a massive grin, the boy sprang back to his feet, unmindful of his slight limp, and made his way down the side passage. As he moved a bit deeper, and seeing that the hall lacked all forms of lighting, he knew he wouldn't be getting far without risk in getting lost in the surprisingly large building, never noticing that as he moved deeper the hall would tilt downwards. Just as he was about to give up his exploring for the day, he spotted it, something large and white that seemed to soak up what little light was in the room. There, before him, sitting on a large, slightly glittering chair, was the woman from the picture. Shock and no small amount of fear washed over him as he stared up at the woman, one hand still holding her odd staff, the other brought up over her heart and showing the long, two-pronged claw he had seen from the mural. Wow. Are you real? As his words echoed through the room, he felt a slight chill sweep over him, like someone had just rubbed ice over the back of his neck. Quickly casting a look around him, he crept closer to the throne. I saw your picture. You were fighting the monster, right? I couldn't see the rest. Could you tell me what happened? As he finally got close enough to really make her out, he saw that she wasn't really there. Well, she was, but she was just a statue. Oh, I guess you can't, can you? Throwing up his hands in frustration, he sat down at the foot of the marble statue and let out a sigh. I wish you were here. I really want to meet a hero, like you, or the fourth Hokage. He was the greatest. He beat a giant fox monster and... Giving a slight chuckle at his own antics, he let a smile linger. That had been the first time he had talked to her about things in his life, and it had become quite the habit. When he had returned that evening to find the matron worried sick, he just smiled and said he had found a great spot to stay cool and lost track of time exploring. She had scolded him for a while, then put him right to bed after a bit of food. That was another thing he was always thankful for. She had always made sure he got enough to eat. The others that would run the food line, or sometimes just the bullies, would always take his good or give it to others. He used to complain about it, but after a while he had given up. Besides, when the matron would take him aside for his stories, she would have warm tea and some little cakes for him, and those were always better than the thin soup that they had to eat. Before he knew it, for years had passed, almost daily he would make his way back to his little hiding place, squirreling away all his little trinkets he would find, make, or be given as the years passed, all of them backed by the statue of his goddess. Well, after he had seen all the murals, courtesy of a small lantern given to him by the Hokage, he couldn't call her anything else. The last of the pictures showed the woman using strange rays of light and her claws to fight the beast, but she ended up being stabbed, it seemed, by one of the tails. As she lay at the beast's feet, there was another man that showed up, somehow trapping the monster in a large ball that was torn from the ground before it was thrown into the sky. The last mural, which dominated the far back wall, was of a scene at night, showing the moon. The whole of their city, if not her people, were in ruins. He knew there was something of them that had lived, this tomb was proof of that, but with no way of reading the script, or even finding out the name of the woman on the throne, then he was largely out of luck. At the time he thought it was a good, fitting name, Megami, and as the years passed it just seemed to grow so by the day. He was hoping that title would mean something today. Making his way through the overgrown grass once more, his head now visible above it, he made his way back into the tomb, down the corridors, whispering his greetings to the ghosts of memories that filled the halls. The dusty floors that had once muted his steps were now cleanly swept and carefully cleaned. Interspaced along the walls, away from prying eyes that may catch the light from outside, were more of the lamps that he had managed to buy or trade for over the years, setting them where it looked torches would have once stood. "Hey Megami-chan, it's me again," taking a moment to light a pair of lamps, causing the large room to glow in the artificial light, and showing her in her true magnificence, he stepped closer before settling to the floor beside her, a lamp at each side of the throne. Once he had gotten light in here, he had been shocked at what he had found. There was the form of his goddess, perfectly smooth and immaculately detailed marble adorned in riches the likes of which he knew he would never see elsewhere in his life, sitting atop a golden throne that had been encrusted in jewels made to look like beetles, serpents and scorpions. Her body, seemingly, was once covered in cloth, as the statue was quite nude, save for her headdress and a section of upper armor, bracers, belt and greaves. Her face itself had deserved immortalization, if he had anything to say about it. Perfect cheekbones, slightly tapered chin giving her an air that reminded him of delicate porcelain, a gently curved nose and a regal mouth that at the same time, he imagined, had the gentlest voice he could imagine. The chest armor was in a large half-circle made of straight bands, not unlike the feathers of a bird, alternating blood-red metal and some kind of green stone that he knew was valuable. The odd armor then swept up her throat in the same alternating bands. Her hair was cast in stone as well, a lusterless black that was well manicured and shone in the light of the room in brilliant contrast to the rest of her form, the black stone almost drinking in the light even as it shined. The crown she wore styled in the same fusion as her chest armor, though the solid greenstone serpents caught the light in a way that made them seem a lighter shade. Wrapped around each of her arms were more of the snakes, with two long belt knives at her thighs had a deep, purple stone inset in the pommel and the hilt. The knife sheaths adorned in a shining yellow metal that he just knew had to be gold, as well as more of the black stone flanking a central strip of gold. Naruto pulled his knees to his chest, hugging them tightly as he rested his head on them, unmindful of his nicest set of clothing, dark brown pants and a black shirt the old man had bought him, getting dust all over them. "She's gone, Megami-can, she's gone, and now I'm all alone. The old man won't have time to come see me. The new matron kicked me out with just these clothes, and these I stole them from Kaase, the matron's room. They were her favorite hairpins." Naruto pulled the little set of jade combs from his pocket, one of the tines broken from the outer edge, probably from where they forced him from the home. The top of the artfully carved combs showed a single lily, inlaid with some kind of white stone. "Megami-chan, if you can you keep an eye on her? She was always really nice to me." Taking a moment to turn the little combs over in his hands, he rose and reached up to slip the combs just below the crown by her hair, the ornament staying and letting the lighter stone shine in the light reflected from her hair. "I don't know if she'd want you to have them, but I do. You're the most important person in the world to me." Looking up into the endless black depths of the statue's eyes, the hollow void seeming to draw him in, he fidgeted. Is it alright if I stay here tonight? Till I can find somewhere else?" Taking the silence as an affirmation, he settled into the statue's lap and curled in on himself. Life, it seems, was just too cruel. Time has an odd effect on people. Some become more attuned to their surroundings and those they are with over the years. Others will gain wisdom, able to give you some of the best advice you can imagine or possess a singular insight into situations. Still more will either become calm and cool, able to calculate and understand situations as well as people, but possessing a cold logic, uncaring of the human element. Naruto, over the next 6 years he would gain a bit of it all. Empathy for those that were not unlike him, outcasts or those that have suffered so much that they just disconnect. Insight into situations and conflict that only an outsider can glean, and a calmness when he focused that would belie the large reserves of energy he possessed. This last aspect is what those in the academy would know him for. While he was known Nara, he did currently hold a solid position in the middle of the pack, something that was obvious to the teachers as the blonde would only answer half of his tests, or not bother to throw all his weapons. He knew what he needed to pass, and he didn't want to draw any undue attention to himself. He was under no delusions that people were more than a little confused as to how he had survived so long after the orphanage had kicked him out. Eventually the Hokage had found him, got him signed off as an adult and given an apartment as well as a stipend to live off on, but upon arriving he had made a decision and instead got a new teacher, a chunin named Irika, to get him a few storage scrolls and quickly packed up everything he could and returned to the safety of the tomb. It was odd, ever since he had asked Megami if he could stay there it had seemed all the more welcoming, the light from his lamp seeming to reach that much further, the food he would cook would taste that much better. Not wishing to impose on his goddess, he set up his bed and things in another of the chambers that he had found in the structure. In one place there were giant statues that reached the ceiling, each one bearing a strange, animal-like head: birds, dogs, lizards and snakes, 8 of them in total, each holding massive weapons that would decimate anything they fought. Another room seemed to be an armory of sorts, holding more of those oddly shaped swords. What he learned were bows and spears. Opposite of them were row upon row of shields and other smaller hand weapons. Throughout it all, he remembered the matron's words, "If it's old, don't touch it." He was no fool. When he had really gotten into exploring the tomb, he came to understand that it was far larger than he thought it was, the halls and chambers twisting deeper and deeper underground and hooking back in on itself so it didn't become a sprawling complex. The only thing that kept it from being found by the sewer workers was its position so far away from houses or businesses. Still, it was a great place to live, especially after he had officially moved in. Every day after his classes he would head back to the apartment and linger for a few hours, always studying or working on his chakra control, at least until he was certain that he had no more prying eyes on him. Then he would slip out through the roof access he had and would make his way through back alleys and tall grasses, using the time to work on his stealth, then would have a simple supper before more training, the larger chambers, halls, staircases and materials in the tomb affording plenty of training opportunities. Hay bale targets, a stone pillar that he would carefully wrap with a spare futon to use as a striking post, long, twisting hallways and steep stairs for speed and reaction training, stones and rope to add weight to his body for physical training. Indeed, the tomb afforded him all he needed. He had even found, in one of the larger halls that held more ceremonial-looking weapons, images on the walls that acted something like a manual, showing fighting styles both with and without weapons, quickly showing the blonde, albeit in an abstract fashion, how his stances should look. How to wield the large weapons as well as the small. He did think at times that the place seemed closed in, stuffy, but whenever he would think that he would see all the images and murals that showed the life of these people and would smile a little. He may not understand the language, but he still felt, somehow, like a part of them, learning their styles, taking up some of their dress, honoring the statues that even he could understand held a religious meaning to them. That was something that had always confounded the teachers. Every time he would rush home and seem to hit the books, never training physically. So how was it that he was getting so strong? Where did his fighting style come from? Then there was his clothing. Over the long years he had begun to adopt the calm, regal look that he had seen on the statues of the tomb, a look that was rather unnerving in one so young. Even the clothing had come to reflect his new mentality. Rather than wearing t-shirts and shorts, pants or even mesh shirts or jackets, he instead kept himself wrapped in a long, pale brown cloak, as though he were traveling through Suna, then when he got to class would take it off. Beneath it he wore a simple, white tunic with a curious half-cape over his shoulder, gathered at the chest with a wooden clasp in the shape of a scorpion, leavening his arms bare and showing the results of long hours of hard work. Simple loose pants tied at the ankles and a woven reed sandal finished off the odd look. The clothing was simple, and shockingly effective. On one side it was a soft white linen, on the other was a deep black, shrouding him as he would need. Due to all the heavy training he did, inside and out, he had a moderate tan that helped to hide him in the foliage of the village even better than the so-called experts in their class, only needed to use a bit of wet ash to break his pattern and move deeper, vanishing almost entirely from the teacher's view. So it was that he had become as much of an enigma as he was known. Finally the day of the graduation exams had come, and he knew he would have little to worry about. The intensive training he had been doing using a variation of the leaf balancing exercise had ensured that he had enough control to use the bunshin. He had been one of the first to understand and use both the substitution and the transformation techniques. His variation was simple. He sent out a small amount of chakra into the sands that coated the floor of the tomb and would then slowly pull it back once it had infused the earth, pulling it with his chakra and keeping a small amount cycling through the area, keeping the sand or dirt clinging to his body before pushing it further up. Eventually letting it cover more and more until he felt his control start to waver, then would push just that little bit more, forcing him to adapt and his control to grow, before he would move out of the tomb and drop it off. Then he did it all over again. Day in and day out. Alright Naruto, you're up, first the henge, then the kawarimi, then 3 bunshin. Yes, Iruka-sensei. Now just try your best Naruto-kun, go slow and try and relax. Yes, Mizuki-sensei. The pair that sat before him always mildly unnerved him, but they also never went out of their ways to bother him, something he was thankful for. First he made a simple ram symbol, focused his chakra into a shell around him and willed it to take the shape he desired, in this case Mizuki-sensei, complete with the little rag he would wear on his head that sported his headband. Next he swapped himself with one of the logs provided for the class for their substitutions, though some part of him noticed that the pull was off, that it seemed to take more chakra than it should. Still, he poured more into it, and succeeded with his swap and moved on. Last came the bunshin, something he had pulled off every time in class without fail, yet still, he felt that odd pull, that more chakra was needed than should have. A clone required a level of finesse that could be troublesome should he just pour more into it like he had with the Kawarimi. Stopping his channeling of chakra for a moment, he looked to his teachers. "Forgive me, Iruka-sensei, may I ask a question?" Iruka had to hide the small smile that threatened to take over his features. Naruto had always been quite respectful of those that had earned it, and apparently he had ingrained himself to the youth when he had first been approached by the boy. He knew he had had a hard time of things, failing the first 2 years at the academy before his removal from the orphanage, and wanted to help the struggling student as much as he could. To his joy, the boy had taken to his lessons with a thriving passion, taking every session to heart and remembering things instantly that were taught in his first year that others couldn't recall with the help of their notes and the books. "Oh, course, go ahead, Naruto-kun." "Sensei, it seems as though I'm having trouble focusing my chakra today. It's probably just the nerves. If it takes a few moments longer, will I be failed?" Mizuki looked ready to speak, but Iruka raised a calming hand. "While yes, this test is in your proficiency in the technique, recognizing your limitations in the field and adapting is just as important. Also, you're the last one to be tested today, so take your time." Both Iruka and Naruto chuckled at the little joke before the blonde nodded and carefully started to gather his chakra, paying attention to the rate of the odd pull that he was feeling coming from all around him, like something was trying to drain his chakra. Finally understanding the rate that he was losing the chakra, Naruto quickly flew through the 3 hand signs needed for the technique, and, with only a slight pulse at the end to up the number, released the chakra, causing the room to fill with smoke for a moment. The instructors were stunned for a full minuet. They had required only 3 clones, yet Naruto had just produced over 20 of the illusionary blondes. "And Naruto, well done. I can see that you still need to work on your control, but you did an excellent job in making your clones. I'm proud to say that you graduate. Come up and get your headband, ninja of Konoha." Naruto gave a small bow, his face split into a wide grin as he moved up and took a pale white headband, something that matched his clothing, and wrapped it securely around his forehead. He spared Iruka a small smile for the thoughtfulness of keeping one of the white ones in reserve for him before he moved back outside to wait with the others. Seeing the others all happily greeting parents, siblings, or guardians caused a slight twinge in his heart. Absently he thought back to the matron, how those little combs would look in her russet hair, the kind twinkle in her green eyes as she would sit him on her knee and read to him, the little cakes she would make. At the same time he thought back to his goddess and smiled. Her gaze was always on him in the tomb. Somehow he knew it, as insane as it sounded, and he knew she would be proud of him. He couldn't wait to get home to tell her. He heard snippets of conversations drifting through the crowd, some of praise, others commenting on where they thought they would rank, all very normal. Then there were the ones directed, somewhat, at him. The half-muttered insults or comments of amazement that they would let a freak like him pass. Again, it was all very normal. When they were all called back inside, Iruka told them about needing to be back at school this time next week in order to get their team assignments, as well as further instructions on their expectations on their new positions as ninja of the village. The whole of the class was walking a bit taller that day as they started to file out. Those that had failed were somewhat buoyed by Iruka's insistence that there was always next year, and that not everyone could pass, as there simply weren't enough instructors to go around. As Naruto was about to leave, opting to be the last for his own reasons, Iruka approached him and clapped a hand on his cloaked shoulders. "Hey Naruto, how about I take you out for a bit of ramen to celebrate my treat?" Naruto let a smile play across his features and gave a small nod. "I'd like that, Iruka-sensei. Just let me go drop off some of my things and take care of some stuff. I'll meet you there in a few hours, is that alright?" The scarred Chunin gave a small nod and patted him on the shoulder before they parted ways. Naruto, feeling the twinge of excitement for the first time in many long months, rushing back to his home, he made a show of lingering before moving to one of his many little escape hatches and started making a meandering path back to his goddess. Mindful of prying eyes that were quickly taking note of his new head ornament, and made a few extra feints, should people try and follow him, like on his birthday. Finally reaching his home, he moved cautiously inside, carefully sidestepping the traps he had lain and turning on a nearby lantern before moving deeper. Reaching the statue of Megami, he smiled, a radiant thing made all the brighter by the well-manicured room, the figure that dominated its center. Putting his things aside, close to one of the little hiding places just outside of the chamber, moved closer to the throne before dropping to one knee and bowed his head, arms crossing at his chest as he had seen some of the people in the murals do. "Megami-chan, I've done it, the first step to becoming recognized, and perhaps one day, the leader of this village. I've become a warrior after all these years, and it was thanks to you that I could come as far as I have. You were there when no one else was, when I was seeking comfort from the villagers or the weather, when people were cruel to me, denying me food or affection. When the matron died, I promise you, Megami-chan, that I will eventually learn all I can about this place, and if I can, I want to bring our people back to the world. I swear it on my life, this one or the next. I'll find a way to make your sacrifice known. Rising from his kneeling position, he got a bit closer to the statue, a part of him thinking that it was smiling at him as his eyes were drawn to the small combs he had placed there so long ago, a flash of the original owner coming to his mind as he reached up and laid a gentle hand on the smooth stone cheek. His eyes going back to the statue's empty gaze before he let his thumb ghost over the marble. Letting out something of a heavy sigh, he stepped back and was about to turn and make his way towards Ichiraku's ramen bar when he heard it. A soft, almost unnoticeable click, then the sliding of stone. Looking back, Naruto was more than a little confused. In all his time here, he had yet to hear anything like it before. Yes, he had found passages that had seemingly been closed before, but this was wholly different. Looking at the throne for a time, he then started making a slow circle around it, looking for the source of the sound, part of him terrified that he had damaged it in some way. After making a full circuit 3 times, he then started looking around the rest of the room when he spotted it. There, just beside the throne and close to the ground, was a small handle jutting up from the flood of the tomb. He had to have stepped over it twice without noticing it. Cursing himself slightly, he looked back into the marble face before glancing at the handhold again. He looked back to Megami in confusion, questioning her about what he should do. Silence was his answer. With a trembling hand, he took a hold of the stone handle. He set his feet firmly and pulled. Slowly the stone started to move, a great grinding sound filling the chamber before a stone pillar just larger than his fist reached the height of his hips. Again he looked to Megami and released the handle, his eyes widening in shock as he saw the stone grip slowly recede into the pillar. As the handle vanished back into the stone, the seam so fine that it could hardly be noticed anymore despite his careful eyes, the whole of the chamber gave a slight shudder, sending a large cloud of dust into the air. Coughing and sputtering slightly, Naruto struggled to see what was happening through the now hazy room, and to his shock the large throne had shifted slightly. No longer did it dominate the center of the room, but now it stood slightly off, as though something else should be in the chamber with it. His curiosity was rewarded when he saw a section of the large stone panels that dominated the floor slowly move aside and a platform arose. Naruto's eyes grew wide, for a moment unmindful of the dust that now stung at his vision as he saw an elegant golden crown rise up until it was almost at chest height. The whole of the things was covered in a thick layer of dust and cobwebs, a husk of a single scorpion lying next to it. It was designed not unlike how Megami's was, at least in coloration and basic structure, but that was where the similarity ended. This crown lacked the twin serpents at the forehead, instead having something that reminded him of a rising sun in a way. What looking like 2 wings swept up and outwards, and set between the two was a circular disc of thin, orange stone that allowed the light to pass through it. The circlet portion and had the same red to green stone and metal that his goddess had, though the rising wings were styled in silvers, golds, and the same dark stone that made up Megami's hair. Naruto stood in awe of the crown for a time, admiring its beauty for an unknown amount of time. Slowly he stepped forward and reached out for it before staying his hand. Taking a moment to undo his headband, he dropped it, utterly forgotten, to the ground before he took up the crown and shaking hands and turned it over and around, looking it over from every angle. Is this for me? Silence was his answer. With a surprisingly steady hand he placed the crown on his head and gasped as a sudden heat rushed through his body. With his eyes screwed shut and grit teeth, he endured what felt like liquid steel being poured into his veins before dropping to his knees panting, the heat that seemed to linger within him settling into his stomach and mind, churning slightly as he slowly rose to his feet and reached up to the crown. To find nothing. Frantic, Naruto looked around the chamber before his eyes locked back onto the platform that once held it, then to the statue of his goddess, and let a sad smile overcome him even as a single tear rolled down his cheek. I guess I wasn't supposed to have it. Forgive me for acting out of turn, my goddess. Absently whipping the tear from his face, he stooped and picked up his headband, tying it securely over his head, not unlike how he saw many in the murals wearing their headdresses before snatching up the bit of money he had squirreled away, intent on buying an extra bowl of ramen tonight to help settle his nerves. Before giving one last bow to the statue and, extinguishing a lantern, left the tomb for the ramen stand. The whole of the night he had been dwelling on the strange occurrence in his home this night. It had made little sense. Had it even happened at all? There were no signs of the crown at all, though he still felt the slight tingle in his fingertips from where he held it, the weight on his brow of the metal and stone, the elation he felt at being given a gift by his goddess. Then the crushing despair of having it all taken away. The ramen had been largely tasteless to him this night. While it had never been his favorite food, this night it just seemed that much more empty. Maybe he should have tried dango. Still, the company had been nice. The trio had easily picked up on his rather somber mood and had done their best to cheer him up, all intent on what would make the rather upbeat teen seem so down. He just smiled and told them it was nothing before going back to his meal. He didn't get any extra ramen that night after all. His musings had been interrupted, however, when an ANBU arrived to give Irika a set of orders, the whispered command making the chunin pale before he quickly tossed some bills onto the bar top and rushed off, Apologizing for his abrupt departure, he quickly leapt to the rooftops and made a mad dash to the tower. Exchanging worried glances with Ayam and Tucci, he wished the two a good night and started making his way back to his home, unmindful of stealth at this later hour, especially considering that most of the ninja force was apparently scrambled for some form of mission, the civilians all hidden in their homes in fear of what may be going on. Reaching the tomb, he was just getting ready to head inside when he spotted it. The disturbed grasses that showed that someone other than him had been there. The light of the waning moon enough for him to see the clear signs of heavy footfalls that lay down the almost reed-like grasses that surrounded the tomb's entrance. Steeling himself, Naruto pulled a pair of kunai from the weapon pouches hidden in the layers of his kilt-like clothing and slid into one of the loose stances he had learned from the tomb, one hand above his head, elbow bend, while the other was pulled loosely to his side, not unlike those who were ready for a solid straight punch, but with his blades held firmly in place for the thrust. With slow, gliding steps he moved around the outside of the little graveyard and, seeing the direction that the tracks had gone, quickly moved after them, intent on finding out just who it was that may have discovered his home. As he moved deeper into the forest, his ears started to pick up the telltale signs of battle, steel ringing off of steel in the distance, as well as the steady, thumping claps of flesh impacting flesh. Gritting his teeth, he crept closer and had froze. There, poised over Iruka with a short sword, was Mizuki, a set of massive shuriken at his back and a large scroll propped against a tree close by. I have to say, Iruka, you put up a better fight than I thought you would for a simple career teacher. Most of us only put up with those snot-nosed little shits as part of the duty. But you honestly like the little brats, don't you? Iruka grunted as Mizuki placed a foot on his chest, causing broken ribs to grind painfully in his chest. And more than I ever did, you team. If anything, Mizuki's smirk grew. Aw, you wound me, Iruka-kun, wasn't I your best friend, your teammate? You're a traitor! With a lazy tilt of his head, the silver-haired teacher avoided Iruka's bit of phlegm. Spitting? Is that all you can do? I expected more. Mizuki stooped lower and brought the short sword to the man's throat. Any last words? A small trickle of blood flowed from his mouth before a small smile graced his lips. Yeah, behind you. The traitor's laugh was long and loud. Seriously? Behind you? That's the best you can come up. Why? The man's eyes widened as he felt the steel slicing into his flesh. Just above his kidneys, a pair of knives had found their mark. Staggering back, he turned and spotted the oddly dressed blonde, his hands passing back into his strange skirt and pulling another set of blades. You. Me. Naruto let fly with another pair, his perfect aim spoiled by the man tossing himself forward and rolling away. Even as he moved, he pulled one of the massive shuriken and brought it before him as a shield, the knives that had wounded him falling away with the sudden movement. Not for the first time, he was happy about the thick vest and how effective it could be at slowing blades and limiting wounds. What could have been a deadly blow was now little more than a nuisance that he knew he would have to treat before he made his final escape from the village. Missed me, demon brat. Did I? Who says it was you I was aiming at? Mizuki stiffened as he heard the sound of steel slicing through the air and spun, whirling the large shuriken in his hand and deflecting the somewhat clumsy throw of his teacher. My, Iruka-sensei, that was poor form, C+. Despite the situation, he smirked at his student. You try throwing straight with broken ribs. Sobering a bit, he forced himself to his feet, one hand absently holding his chest. Naruto, go to the village and get help. Mizuki's stolen a scroll with forbidden techniques and must be stopped. I'll slow him down. With a curt nod, Naruto turned to follow his orders, understanding that if this should fall into the wrong hands, it would cost many more lives than that of one Chunin and one Genin. Oh, are you sure about that, Iruka-kun? After all, this scroll holds some rather interesting things about our blonde here. Mizuki, don't say another word. As it stands, you may get life in prison, but if you tr. Oh, I think I'd rather take death. Those cells are just too dank. Now then, Naruto-kun, would you like to know a secret? No. You mustn't. Naruto's confusion was almost palpable as he turned back to the clearing to see Iruka trying to force his legs into propelling himself forward. But if the blood coming from his mouth was any indication, then the scared Chunin was already in serious trouble. Mizuki just stood with a sadistic grin as he stared at Naruto. Oh, but Iruka, don't you think that your favorite student deserves to know the reason he's hated? Why no one would adopt him? Why it was that he was given such a crappy little apartment, and so little money to live off of? What? Naruto, don't listen to him. He's just going to lie to you. A sickening choking sound filled the clearing as Iruka dropped to his knees, arms wrapped around his chest as he coughed up a gout of blood. Naruto was moving before he realized it, trying to get to his sensei's side only to have the large shuriken impact the ground before him, stopping the blonde dead in his tracks as Mizuki pulled the other large blade. Now, let your elders finish speaking before you act. Naruto, if you knew the truth, then you would hate this village as much, no, maybe more than Orochimaru-sama himself. Naruto, you are the nine-tailed fox. The teenage blonde froze. He was a demon. Suddenly all the looks, But muttered comments, the people at the orphanage, it all made sense. That's why no one wanted him. That's why Megami rejected him. And Naruto, it's not true he the fourth, he sealed it for Irika. The world went dark. That gave him pause. That marking on his stomach he couldn't understand, it was a seal. He wasn't the fox, it was inside him. But that didn't make him it any more than it making it him turning cold, blue eyes on Mizuki. He felt his chakra spike as his emotions surged. And that odd warmth that had been stirring in the back of his mind and stomach grew hotter. As his chakra peaked, the massive wave of blue energy becoming a visible thing around him, something that shocked the former Chunin to no end. He felt it, the same white-hot burning coursing through his body and penetrating his mind, his vision filling with spots before things started to become clear. Visions of sandy plains and magnificent structures that stretched to the horizon. Images of artfully sculpted and carved statues and columns. He possessed the knowledge. He possessed the power. The strength to lead, the wisdom to rule, it was all his. Mizuki watched with sinister glee as Naruto's chakra went berserk, unmindful of the fact that it could probably be felt miles away. He only cared about the boy's suffering right now. Hell, if he pushed him just that little bit more, he might break the seal and let the demon ravage the village once more. Orochimaru-sama would be so proud. As he watched, idly spinning the shuriken as he debated on how to make Naruto go that much further, he saw it. The chakra that was visible seemed to pull back. Rather than spiking around him and kicking up the earth and leaves around them, it instead seemed to surround him like a cold fire. Slowly Naruto rose from his slightly hunched posture, icy blue eyes locking on him before he rose to his full height. You who would dare to use the sacrifices of another to fuel your own deeds, you who would injure friends in the name of power, you who would spit on your home for personal gain, you are an insult to all that you may have stood for, and those who would wear the mantle of traitor are forfeit. He quirked an eyebrow at that, a smirk playing across his lips. Oh, well spoken, but tell me, Genin, what will you do to stop me? There was no smile, no hard words, only a sense of pity around the blonde as he looked at Mizuki. I am no mere Genin, where we are I rule. With that, Naruto extended his hand. And all Mizuki knew about the world changed. The Chunin could only watch in mild confusion as Naruto extended one hand, the chakra coalescing and seeming to pool, making a brilliant blue sphere that reminded him of the legends of the Yondaime. Naruto then simply turned over his hand and let the ball fall. As the orb impacted the ground, he was startled to feel the earth shake slightly, a pulse of blue chakra racing through the landscape faster than he could even begin to react to. Looking around him for a moment, he grinned. Nothing had happened. Ha! Leave it to the mediocre boy to waste chakra? Looking back up at Naruto, he was stunned. There, where the boy's headband had once been, was a very strange hat of some kind of muted red and green thing that seemed to shimmer and waver as he turned his head, as though it wasn't quite there. Following his line of sight, he saw him looking at one of the little clearings, a largely bare patch that he had been sitting on trying to decipher some of the jutsu in the scroll before he had been so rudely interrupted. There, in the earthen patch, something stirred. Mizuki gripped his shuriken a bit tighter as something seemed to travel through the earth, swirling slightly, as though it were softening it somehow. When he felt it, a deep shudder in the ground once more, like something had broken deep beneath the earth. Sentinels at the portal of eternity, mighty guardians of the king! Arise! Mizuki felt the hairs rise on the back of his neck. King? Guardians? The earth shifted, and a carefully bandaged hand appeared from the ground. What are you doing? What kind of jutsu is th? Mizuki was cut off as a long, bronze blade erupted from now sandy soil, the oddly curved thing looking like a katana blade that was far too broad, curving back down to still be hidden by the ground. The hand that had emerged gripped at the earth as best it could, seeming to pull itself up slowly. More and more of the cruel-looking weapon began to emerge, then what looked to be a golden serpent, and a bleached white helmet. Mizuki let out a keening wail as he watched this thing pull itself from the earth. That wasn't a helmet. It was the top of a skull. More and more began to appear, thick, bronze armor, the body wrapped in tattered bandages that did nothing to hide the pale ones beneath it. A thick belt with a skull at its heart, and something like a loincloth. Mizuki backpedaled quickly from the skeletal warrior that was now almost fully free before seeming to notice that he still had his weapon, his fear at the moment blinding him to all else before he suddenly felt the comforting weight in his hands once more. Quickly he snapped his wrist, spinning it quickly and turning it into a great saw before throwing it with all the strength he could muster, the thing rotating in the air and finding its mark. The sounds of brittle, shattering branches filled the air as the shuriken tore through the skeleton's chest, shattering ribs and sending the bronze armor scattering across the clearing, its arms falling away as its head rolled across the ground to come to rest before him. With a victorious cry he brought one foot down, shattering it into nothingness. Pathetic demon! You think something like this could beat me? I'm a Chunin. Nothing short of an army can stop me. Naruto just looked at him impassively for a moment before slightly nodding, an almost regal act, as you wish. Mizuki froze as he heard that same odd clattering and shifting of the earth before turning. There, standing in almost perfect military formations, were another dozen of the warriors, all holding the same, massive curved swords, each as long as they were tall, but each were held easily, as though they possessed all the strength in the world. As one the skeletons stepped forward, and began to spread out. Mizuki leapt onto one of the surrounding branches, watching as the things began to fan out, taking positions at the foot of each of the trees. One of them, this one holding his massive blade easily in one hand, the other with an equally large emerald-green shield, moved up to the scroll that he still had propped against the tree. He cursed as the warrior dropped the shield to scoop up the scroll, quickly making its way over to Naruto. With a roar he pulled a brace of kunai and let fly. However, to his dismay, the iron darts only clattered weakly off the bones before falling to the earth. He would have to go bigger. Quickly the Chunin began to move their hand signs, Doton, Doriyuso. He slammed his palms into the trunk of the tree, willing his chakra to race through the wood and into the earth. At once the newly churned ground seemed to flow, coming together and hardening before lashing out, forming several massive spears that pierced through the warrior and shattering him not unlike how his shuriken had. With a triumphant grin he pulled another set of kunai, ready to throw them at the blonde when he felt the tree he was on shudder. Looking down he felt his jaw hang loose. The entire trunk of the massive thing had shifted, the mark of a shockingly clean cut that had lain the tree low clear even in the dim light. Quickly the Chunin made to jump again only to gasp in horror. All the other trees around him were falling as well. One of the prime rules of war: if the enemy goes to ground, leave no ground to go to. His eyes widened at the voice whispering into his ear as he felt a foot planted firmly in his floating rib, the bone giving under the force of the strike as he was propelled to the ground, slamming painfully into his own hardened spears, only luck saving him from being skewered. With a growl he made to rise only to feel an icy grip on his wrist. Looking up in confusion he lets out another whimper of pure fear. There, staring back into brown eyes, were the soulless black voids of a skull. His free hand came around hard, kunai still gripped tightly, and pierces the bone cleanly through its odd circlet, the golden serpent falling away just as the head did. But still it did not let go. Stabbing again and again at the hand, he was only managing glancing blows when he heard it, the shifting of earth under feet. Turning slowly he saw them, the whole group, now almost 20 strong, surrounding him, their blades held high to strike. I will give you one last chance, surrender. I yield. A wise choice. Naruto looked to his men and gave a curt nod. At once the 20 warriors gave a sharp twist of the weapons in their hands, turning the blades to their backs before bringing all 20 down at once. Mizuki's cries filled the clearing. You have done well, my children. Gather the fallen and rest. I will deal with these. Silent visages turned and began to collect the pieces of armor, bone and weapons before they turned as one large column and began to march back to their homes. All heading for the tomb. Naruto collected the scroll quickly and slung Iruka over his shoulder in a fireman's carry. He spared a glance at Mizuki but knew he wouldn't be going anywhere. If he died, he died. They had a good idea where he was heading after his Orochimaru-sama comment. Wasting no time, he made a beeline for the village. First stop, the hospital. His debriefing had been an interesting one again, and again the Hokage had asked how he had managed to subdue Mizuki. Again and again he had told him that he had simply caught the man unaware while Iruka had kept him busy, that when he had seen the man trying to kill his sensei he had snapped and beat him mercilessly with a found branch. He never wavered from his story, so it had to be accepted. Though he did tell the old man had disappointed he was in him for never telling him about the Kyuubi. Something that the elderly leader was shocked that he had known, and silently vowed that Mizuki would die for revealing. He had asked, more out the desire to change the subject than anything, about what team he would be on. He had been told that after his impressive display with clones during the graduation that he had been specially requested to be under Kurenai Yuhi, the village's genjutsu mistress. Naruto had to fight the urge to smile at that. She was one of the pretty girls he had seen growing up. With a small smile and a nod, Naruto had turned to leave, only to be stopped by the third and told that he would be there, if he was wanting to talk about his problems. Naruto gave a slight nod, but inside was annoyed that he would only now, after all these years, be willing to listen. He didn't need that. He already had someone that would listen, and better, would never judge him. Arriving back at his home, he walked directly back inside the crypt and froze. His trap had been tripped. The bladed snare he had fashioned lay broken on the ground, the trap having apparently missed its mark to shatter on the stone, the scythe-like blade in several pieces scattered across the floor. His heart froze. Rushing inside, he headed straight for the Megami's chamber. And instantly fell to his knees, tears rushing down his cheeks as he started into the room. The throne sat empty, the floor around it scattered with bits of broken marble, the elaborate riches gone and his lamps overturned, all save one that offered a guttural, flickering light as the little bulb tried desperately to hold on. He felt his heart clench tightly, the doors of his emotions steadily clenching closed. She was his world, yet someone. Crawling forward through the stone shards, unmindful of the cuts appearing across his form as the stone bit deep, as if to accuse him of his failings, he reached his target. The strangely intact face of his goddess. With trembling hands he picked up the marble as gently as he could, running a thumb across its cheek once more as its pristine surface began to be covered with tears he wasn't aware he was shedding. His teeth clenched with shattering force. They will pay. His chakra flared. Another of the odd, blue pulses raced through the floors of the tomb, blasting away the dust and grime. Long dead oil torches he had never been able to reach bursting to life and filling the tomb with gentle light even as things long still began to stir once more. Holding the face a bit closer he saw that the way it had broken had left it concave and smooth, not unlike a mask. With a bitter smile he placed the shattered stone onto his face, using a small flow of chakra to hold it in place. Almost at once his tears began to flow through the once vacant eye holes down marble cheeks as he made a tight fist, part of him noticing the long dead husk of the scorpion skittering closer to him before it moved up his arm and over his body. I made you a promise me. He looked closer at the throne, the odd script now as legible as his textbooks, and smiled. Xandri, I promised I would bring back our people, and I will, my queen. The Deshret shall rise once more. Chapter 2, Those Who Serve. So it is said of Fitep, first among the high priests of the Deshret, last among the priesthood, he and his disciples ensured the survival of the 8,000, that he gave his life to ensure the future. May he continue to protect the people in the next life. Translated from the hieroglyphics at the Pillar of Remembrance. The Dark Beauty. The Seductress. The Blood-Red Rose. The Ice Queen. The Red Sunset. She had as many names as she did faces. It was a simple fact that all who dealt with women would learn in time. Women had many faces. Joy. Anger. Sorrow. These were only 3, yet in the world of ninja there were none that knew all the faces a kunoichi would possess. That reason was a simple one. Should they see them all, then they were destined to die. It was an immutable fact of the ninja world. She was called an uncommon beauty, and while she didn't ignore her looks, she also didn't try and flaunt them. If she had to judge herself, she would say she was a little too short in her mind, her hips a bit too wide, an unruly head of hair that refused to be tamed, and bizarre eyes that, in the right lighting, would scare even herself. There were few that would agree. Karina Yuhi was her name, and for once, she was having a good day. Very few men had approached her. Many of the civilian girls in the village were being a bit nicer for some unknown reason. She just got her first genin team, and there hadn't been a single sign of Asuma all day. Even Anko, her best friend, had been in an uncommonly good mood, something about having a new toy to play with. That always made her shudder. Ever since her problems with her former sensei, she was a bit too quick to cut, but at her core was still the same, fun-loving girl she had always been. It was just a pity that so few others could see it. Most seemed to think that she was a promiscuous woman due to her style of dress and panache for flirtatious behavior. Ludicrous. With that look she ensured that only a certain kind of man would approach her. A kind that she could easily turn away, or if they persisted, she wouldn't feel bad about hurting. As much as the fun-loving girl still lived within her, she knew that her pain ran deeper than most could understand. The only one, she imagined, that may be able to understand her was oddly enough her new student. One Naruto Uzumaki. One more reason she was glad that she had gotten him on her team. With the joint training she had in mind for her little minions, she was hoping that they, or at least he, may forge a bond not unlike what she held with the woman. Anything to get her to take someone else to that blasted dango stand. Anyone that really knew her knew that she preferred fish, spicy fish at that, so why would the woman always take her to get those blasted little dumplings? Shaking herself from her mild rant, she pressed on. While she knew she would be on time for the meeting, a part of her always preferred to be a little early, a tick picked up from her own Jonin sensei long ago. Sparing a nod to the 2 Anbu at the gate, she made her way up the spiraling tower and to the Hokage's office, pausing at the door for a moment as her nose wrinkled. Asuma. Making a quick hand sign, she shunted chakra to anywhere but her nose, briefly feeling lightheaded as her ears started picking up the mumbling through the door, her eyes stinging slightly and fighting the urge to readjust her clothing, the slight pinch of her brow standing out all the more with that extra bit of energy running through her. Knocking twice, she waited a moment before hearing the rather comforting voice of her Hokage before entering and giving the older of the Sarutobis a smile. She didn't hate Asuma by any means, but the man needed to learn how to take a hint. If he was smoking, she wasn't going to give him the time of day. It wasn't like his father's tobacco, that she could honestly say she rather liked. The sweet, often cherry-flavored, off-blue smoke was something that was almost pleasant for her. However, Asuma tended to prefer the raw tobacco from AIM. The rather industrial village had those pollutants seep into their leaf, and it was something you could smell and taste in the air. Something he would never take into account. She had done everything short of yanking the pack out of his vest and incinerating it to get the man to take the hint. Men. Kurnei-san, punctual as always, I hope the day finds you well. Yes, Hokage-sama. Smirking slightly, the elderly leader waved her off somewhat. Now, the meeting hasn't started yet. No need to be overly formal right now. You could take a lesson from your friend. I am a grandfather, and hope to get back to doing that properly here in a few years. That made a small smile form across perfectly painted lips. As you wish. If I may, why were we all called here today? He absently pulled his pipe from his desk, beginning to fill it as he considered his answer. Officially, I'm just handing out the files on your genin for tomorrow's selection. Unofficially, I need to speak to you, Anko-chan, Ibiki-kun and Irika-kun about what happened 3 nights ago. She gave a silent nod as she watched Asuma with her peripheral, refusing to let the man think she was eyeing him. So Kurenai-san. Oh please no, not in front of the Hokage. What do you think of your team? She had to bite her tongue to keep from sighing in relief. I believe they possess remarkable potential. What about yours? Idly he pulled a cigarette from his vest, the pronounced ting of his lighter echoing through the office before flicking the striker a few times as he considered his response. I'm currently going to be heading up the next generation of one of our more famous ninja trios. Honestly, I can't complain. Though I'm going to have to rely on their clans quite a bit, but you've got a weapon freak, a Hyuga, and the outcast. All 3 I think should have been last picks, but you had the first choice. Why pick them? Why not the Uchiha, the Haruno, or the Yamanaka? She ground her teeth slightly as she moved closer to the Hokage, the smoke already grating on her, though the apparent lack of faith from her fellow jonin may have played a bigger part in that. My team, Asuma, is of little concern to you, though I suppose I'll humor you. If I can hone that skill into wide-range genjutsu, then he will be a force to be reckoned with. Hinata has perfect control, can be an expert tracker, and is already showing a skill for medicine. Tenten looks up to one of the Sannin and is stopping at nothing to get to her level. Trust me, my team is going to be a powerhouse when I'm finished with them. Both Sarutobi were doing their best not to shrink away from Brunette. They didn't realize how fiery she could be when pressed. Come now, Kurenai-san, I'm sure my son wasn't trying to be insulting. I happen to agree that these 3 have great potential. Young Anko will be assisting in your training, yes? She nodded. She's still officially not allowed to take a team, yet still desires to teach, so I offered a hand, and with the limited number of Nuknin coming in I thought it better to keep her busy. A bored Anko is an interesting Anko. Of Kurenai-chan talking about me behind my back again. Kurenai couldn't hide her smirk any more than the Hokage, while Asuma was starting to wonder if he had missed something. So what are your thoughts? She gnawed on her lip for a time before smirking. It's almost a perfect balance, not over-specialized, and not weak in any one area. The blonde will be the heavy hitter from the looks of it. The Hyuga has almost perfect chakra control and decent reserves thanks to her fighting style, and can be a melee beast if we break her out of that shell. And Buns here, with a little coaching, could get as good as me at extracting information. I'd say a perfect deep recon, capture/retrieval or assassination team. Kurenai gave a curt nod. Oh yes, she had hit the nail on the head. Although it says here you're wanting to turn the blonde into a genjutsu user? Why? Primarily due to the fact that he has such remarkable control, despite having such massive reserves. With that kind of power he may even be able to develop a genjutsu that could fool the Sharingan. Anko let out a low whistle, the look in her eyes showing just how quick her mind was working. I'll be damned, assuming he could increase the power and maintain control, and that's a big if. He could convince the body that the injuries or the setting was real. He could actually manage to kill if he does this right. My thoughts exactly. You're not planning on trying to get him to use it, are you? Anko looked to the Hokage like he was covered in something foul. You, of all people, asked me that. The elderly leader flinched at the pain in her voice. The very idea of using power from another was sickening to her. He knew as much, but really, who wouldn't feel that way if they had been through what she had? Forgive me, Anko-chan. There are times that even a professor can be absent-minded. A soft knock echoed through the room before he called for the person to enter. Quickly 2 men entered the room, one a towering man seemingly made of a scowl, the head of the interrogation unit. Behind him, wheeling himself into the room, was Irika, the man moving more than a little gingerly thanks to the apparent wrappings on his chest. Lord Hokage. Hokage-sama. Now that the main players are here, we can begin. Irika-kun, first I would like to say I'm sorry to call you here from your rest. You must in a great deal of pain. He gave a weak smile, looking far too pale for a man of his age, and nonsense. Hokage-sama, I live to serve. He gave him a small smile. Very well. Now then, the main reason I've called you all here to discuss the events that had transpired that night. As some in this room are aware, Naruto has become aware of his burden. That caused a few eyes to widen. And my lord, what will become of him? What was his reaction? Will we still be allowed to train him? Did he flee the village? The elderly leader once more raised his hands, attempting to calm his son, and the boy's sensei to be easy. Apparently after the revelation something had happened. You all felt the chakra spike from the forest, I presume? They nodded. Good. It would seem that when Naruto found out he, through rather selective means from Mizuki, was in severe emotional distress. After a last reassurance from Irika before he succumbs to his injuries, Naruto apparently was able to subdue Mizuki with, thus far, unknown means. Ibiki-san? The scared special Jonin drew up to his full height before nodding. Yes, Lord Hokage. Naruto, upon delivering Irika to the hospital for damage to his ribs that had resulted in a punctured lung, came before the Hokage and reported that he had engaged Mizuki with the help of the aforementioned Chunin and, upon seeing Irika seemingly die, in the boy's words, coupled with the revelation of the fox, had snapped and beat Mizuki into submission with a found branch. However, the evidence does not support this statement. Explain. Nodding once more to his leader, he produced a few files and began to pass it around the group, the Hokage having a personal copy. As it can be seen from his injuries, he has indeed been bludgeoned. However, you can see from the bruising that it seems to have been an object with clearly defined edges. Riffling through a few pictures, Anko had to fight back her grin. Someone had seriously worked the man over, and it was clear that something a lot heavier than a branch had done this. What did Mizuki say? Her boss just shook his head. That's the problem. From what we can tell, he's gone completely insane. He insists that Naruto somehow had summoned the dead to fight for him, before they beat him into submission. Even said the kid had a crown. That caused a few to chuckle. It's possible he found an iron rod, or a dull sword out there, and in his anger just doesn't remember. Again he shook his head. No, we have scoured that area. Take a note of the scene photos. Whatever happened there, it was big. Even if the kid had somehow tapped into his power, it would have been different. The fox's chakra, naturally, is destructive, but it doesn't cut, it rends. No, whatever happened there, it was done with an edged weapon or weapons. I have requested some of the local swordsmen and blacksmiths investigate the area and report back the nature of the weapon. I will say this, I've never seen a cut that clean before on a tree, and if it was a weapon, why not just kill Mizuki? The Hokage just sat there for a time, his eyes closed, before letting out a sigh. It's clear that there is something new in the village, be it an unknown ninja, a new technique, or a weapon that has yet to be revealed. There is also a matter of some of the civilian and retired ninja in the village disappearing since that night. Thus far we have lost 4 such people. Now normally, with the graduation having just occurred, this would not be too much of a problem, as many that did not pass would be relocating to one of the surrounding civilian villages. However, it's the condition they were found in that's alarming. Ibiki. Yes. It seems that those that were found dead had every scrap of chakra drained from their system. There is one such ninja in the village that could accomplish such a deed, a genin named Akudu Yoroi. However, his location is accounted for at the apparent time of the deaths. Either training with his teammates at the time, or at his part-time job at Aquifers. Kurenai arched an eyebrow at that. Such a technique would be powerful indeed for anyone, but a genin able to do such a thing? This boy and his teammates, I don't recall them graduating. Who's their sensei? The group's sensei, one Aorokishu, became a missing nin after the theft of the Raijin no Ken 6 years ago. Since then they have been passed to what jonin have been available. The team's leader, Kabuto Yakushi, is the adoptive son of the head of the hospital and is an accomplished medic in his own right, helping to train many of our up-and-coming nurses. They've been genin for 6 years, yet have such accomplished skills, and their sensei is a missing nin? And the council calls me a security risk. While most just ignored the violet-haired woman's rant, Hiruzen's mind was busy working. Anko had a point. With a gesture unseen by the gathered ninja, he made a sign to the room's hidden black ops, and sent a few ninja to keep an eye on the group, regardless. As Ibiki-san has said, he has an alibi. Therefore, in addition to the Mizuki incident, we must keep watch for those that may be new in town or possess exotic items. Kurenai, your team possesses a young woman that is known to have great interest in weapons. Try and ask her, as subtly as you can, about what could do such a thing. My lord, if I may make a suggestion. Of this generation of genin, only Naruto has knowledge of what happened that night, and more specifically, where. I suggest that perhaps we set up this new clearing as a training ground. My team can meet there, and as an impromptu quiz I can ask Tenten what weapon could make such a mark. After a long moment he gave a slow nod. Agreed. However, make sure that when you do, Naruto is not nearby. If he does know something, he may try and influence her answer. My lord? He paused to start refilling his pipe. As much as I want to trust Naruto in this, all my attempts over the last few years to get close to him have come up short. I fear that his loyalty to the village may be lax. That caused several wide eyes. Irika, the only one that dared break the silence. Lord Hokage, surely you're not suggesting that Naruto, the one whose dream it is to be Hokage, could be a traitor? His features hardened, sharply reminding them all exactly who he was, not the kindly grandfather, but the fire shadow, and god of shinobi. Irika-san, as much as I want to believe in Naruto, my first priority is to the village, and if he has become a threat to the people, I am obligated to find out just how great it may become. You know as well as I do that he does not view me, or even you, in the same light that he once did, becoming increasingly distant to us. Enko's scowl seemed a sharp counterpoint in the room, cooling where the Hokages had been heating. He's a teenager for Kami's sake. We all pull away from our parents growing up, I mean come on. You really think that little ball of fuzz that used to spy on Naichan and I on the way to the academy is plotting all our deaths? Before her tirade could grow any further there was a massive spike in chakra in the room, silencing all involved as they were crushed by the weight of the anger it held. Enough. Mitarashi-san, I know that you see this boy as a parallel to yourself in some ways, but the fact of the matter is that even using the crystal ball I cannot track him at all times. Either he, or some outside source is blocking our scrying attempts. Add to that he keeps loosing the tails that we put on him, and yes, I have to ask myself that. So you were having him followed, for how long? You at least had the courtesy of telling me. For a little kid like him I'd bet that he just got paranoid as all hell and just started running and hiding as a reflex. You know what this place is like. At the best they ignore him. Mitarashi, you're dismissed. Boo. Dismissed. She snapped a hasty salute before turning on her heel and leaving a group of stunned watchers. Some couldn't believe how she had reacted, but for two, they were shocked that the Hokage had thought so little of the boy, them wondering what his father may say if he was still there. Unknown to them all, one old man was wondering just how true her words had been. The last 3 days had been unique for Naruto. Why, you may ask, was it just these 3 days that would stand out? That was simple. He himself hadn't so much as seen the sun once in all that time, something of a rarity of the blonde. For you see, when Naruto had finally chanced looking up from his rage-fueled moment, he had been shocked to see he was surrounded by withered husks of what looked to be the very people who had once lived in his people's past, those that looked to have stepped out of the walls themselves, though they had aged horribly. His gaze had drifted to each face in turn, the cracked features, the crumbling bandages, all surrounded by the faded splendor of what they once were. Each were knelt around the vacant throne seeming to wait for him to finally acknowledge them. With a hollow voice, one that seemed almost as old as they were, he spoke, "You, who are you?" The first, this one seemingly once dressed more magnificently, a tarnished, yet still quite impressive headdress of turquoise and gold, his robes tattered and falling from his body even as he tried to maintain his regal form. A rasping hiss, a small cone of dust married with flakes falling from lips long devoid of warmth, "My liege." What? Sire, what is your will? My will? We have awoken by your will. What are your orders? Naruto stared at the withered man for a long moment, after a time the figure shifting slightly. Even now Naruto could feel the faint weight of his crown, tendrils of knowledge snaking their way into his mind. Are you and the guards the extent of what lies here? Naruto now learned that the dead could indeed laugh. My liege, if we may, we can show you. For the next 3 days, though he was ignorant of the passage of that time, he was lead ever deeper into the twisting tomb, rooms long sealed or hidden now open. The massive figures in the hall that he had once thought were mere depictions of gods were now alive, each saluting him as they passed. Massive blades and stone arms, making a dull crash as they slammed into their chests in a great X. The training halls that he had sweated in so much were now filled with rank upon rank of warriors. Each were not as well equipped as the guards that had come to his aid, some part of him knowing that these had served as his true soldiers, those that made the backbone of his armies. That gave him pause. When had he ever had an army? Such thoughts were banished as he watched them pick up the aged weapons and armors, and almost lovingly they began to polish, sharpen, and mend all they put their stripped hands on. Deeper still they moved, passing massive doors that, when asked, he was told contained the charnel pits where his legions had been buried. Others were the royal treasure rooms, still more were the armories meant for the kings, queens, and of course, the priests. One of these treasuries had been something Naruto couldn't help but stop at, something telling him, demanding him, to enter. Despite the protests of those around him, he cast the doors wide and strode in, his posture befitting a king. There, on an altar before him, was a great golden staff. The thing was thick, looking almost like a quarterstaff in some ways. Thought at the head of the staff was a massive carrion bird, its wings held aloft, and showing that the feathers' tips were brought to a razor edge, the bird's eyes made of rubies, his beak forged of tapering crimson gold, giving the appearance of it having recently fed. The length of the shaft textured with feather upon feather. Priest, what is your name? Vitep, my liege, the 48th High Priest of the Dishret, and the teacher of High Priestess Zandri. Naruto paled. Zandri. Where is she? Is she here? No, sire. Her place is elsewhere. He deflated a bit. I see. What of this staff then? I feel drawn to it. That, my king, is the staff of the Sky Lord Alcazar I. He was the first to begin to revere the great carrion of the eastern oasis of Anai. Since then we have made it a point to entomb several with each king, queen, and priest. These birds are holy, as they would cleanse the battlefields of the dead, preventing sickness and the fouling of the water. I've been meaning to ask you. You don't seem alarmed that you are well alive again. Again, The priests gave dark chorus chuckles, causing another blast of dust and dried flesh. You would naturally be curious, my young king, but it has long been known to the people that when we were needed once more that a king would call on our aid. Though we all prayed for such things to be unnecessary, we knew the day might come that we would be called away from paradise. Our allegiance is timeless, and we know that when the need passes that we will return to our sleep. Naruto's head bowed low as he gave small acknowledgments to each priest in turn. He was a bit comical to see a dead man surprised. For my part in this, I am sorry to have brought you back. To be honest, it was unintentional. I was just so mad I guess I lashed out without realizing. Please, understand, though I may be king in your mind, in mine. I am lower than you. I raised myself according to the reliefs, nothing more than a common soldier now I. Sire, please, whether it be by prophecy, choice or victory, you are our king, and we will serve loyally. You bear the crown. You would be unable to if you were anything but our lord. Without missing a beat, the gathered priests, 13 in all, dropped smoothly to a knee, something that didn't seem possible with their aged bodies, before crossing their arms before their chests, a sign of bondage and servitude to the king. What is your command? Giving a small smile, Naruto nodded and made a small gesture for them to stand. Tell me more of this staff. Sire, this staff is a symbol of leadership of Alcazar but also served as a powerful weapon. Its blade was said to be able to cleave a sea of sand in but a single sweep, and the gaze of the great carrion would smite his foes with the raw, untamed heat of the desert. It is a formidable weapon. I see, most impressive, and what of the drawbacks? As you can see, my lord, it is quite large, and shines brightly in the sun, a fine thing for troops to rally behind, but for a single warrior, without shield, chariot or steed, it can be a glaring beacon to draw foes to you. Alcazar's son used such a thing to lure his enemies into traps, though that lead to his demise. Naruto gave a small smile as his eyes danced over the simple, yet elegant weapon, his hand already moving to grasp it, when suddenly, gnarled, dried fingers locked around his wrist. My liege, forgive me for overstepping my bounds and daring to lay a hand on you, but this staff is one that you must not treat lightly. It has killed any outside of Alcazar's line that has dared to touch it. Naruto gave the priest a reassuring smile. Then I shall be the first. As I said, Fitep, I was drawn here. I do not think the staff will harm me. Boo. I appreciate your concern for me, but this is something I will need to find Megami-chan's destroyer, and be an effective ruler to you all. Please trust me. If I am to be a good leader, a good servant to you all, I need to be as strong as I possibly can. Another first. A dead man looked scandalized. Sire, you are our lord. We are your servants, soldiers, slaves. You can know. Fitep, this crown has shown me many things. It showed me the rich history of our people, our culture, our faith and traditions, and yes, while I may lead, should you not follow, not pledge to listen, to serve, then all this crown is a fancy hat. Nothing more. No, a king is nothing without his people. While you all may only be here for a time, you are all infinitely more experienced in the powers that return life to this place, and by your suggestions then I will be more effective in battle, commerce, building and diplomacy. Without you all, I just have mindless soldiers. But if you're with me, and I listen, then we will have a force that will make the very gods envious of our splendor. While the sight was lost on him, several of those surrounding him seemed to stand a little straighter, their features losing some of their cracked age as his power pulsed and flowed through the temple. The eyes of the staff flashed. My lord, if you feel this way, why don't you listen to my warning? The staff. As I said, it called. What kind of leader would I be if I didn't listen? With that, his hand extended. The tomb shook. For Anko, her day had been, largely, one of utter and complete shit. First she gets into a fight with her surrogate grandfather over a boy she only ever saw in passing, then the dango stand on the way to her home was closed, the little paper sign just stating cold, then she had run across one of the little annoyances from the bar that never seemed to be able to take a hint. Really, she had decided to be nice once and buy a guy a drink after his sob story over losing a girl. Now he wouldn't leave her alone. Thanking the fact that they didn't teach the body flicker technique until you made special jonin, she was able to beat a hasty retreat. Though it was one of the last places that she normally wanted to end up at. A cemetery. Though it wasn't so much the plot of land, what it meant, or what it contained, it was the fact that her intended perch had suddenly shaken violently. That, coupled with the seal on her neck attempting to flare with the use of her chakra and the general chaos of trying to reorient yourself when you are coming back from such a jutsu, and the results were less than pleasant. A widening of eyes, a sudden sense of vertigo. A sudden pain in her forehead, and the humiliation of being face down, ass up for all to see. One more good thing about cemeteries, there were never very many people in them, unless there was a funeral that day, and a funeral is something this place hadn't seen in 100 years. She quickly rolled over and sprang to her feet before looking about. The place was just as desolate as when she had first come here, years ago, when she had gotten curious and followed the little blonde boy she had seen running through a back alley, and the way he had changed as the years passed. She was no fool, she knew exactly why Kurenai had requested her help on the team, she knew how the boy had been ignored over the years, always just a hair's breadth from the violence that the populace could exact on him, so much like her, in a way, that it was scary. Still, to choose to live in a tomb rather than an apartment, even if you knew that place had been watched, was a bit extreme. Still, she couldn't deny that it had been, apparently, a good change for him, if his looks and skills were anything to go by. While she had been curious, ungodly so, as to what was inside, she hesitated. She had seen the traps he had put at the entrance, and if her time in TNI had taught her anything, is that the simple traps were the ones you spotted, it was the ones deep inside that only trackers and field engineers could spot that would end you. So using a blind shunshin inside the structure was a no-no. The strangest thing about the whole situation, however, hadn't been the fact that she would watch the boy like this, it was the fact that after her event with her sensei, that these odd little excursions, the memories of this place, was all that she could hold on to. If it had to deal with the blonde, then she could remember it, almost with perfect clarity. She didn't have her mother's face, but she could remember him covered in dust leaving the tomb, then releasing the chakra and letting it fall to the ground. She couldn't remember childhood friends unless she had spotted him when they were out and about. It's one reason that she insisted on being so close to Kurenai instead of Yugao, despite her insistence that they had been closer than she and Kurenai had ever been. The boy that caught rabbits, the one that would drag a bolt of cloth into those shadow depths, make tools of stone, train until he bled, and more than anything, suffered in silence. The death of the matron of the little orphanage that he and Tenten had once stayed in had happened the same year that Orochimaru had betrayed the village, the same year that she had been branded, the same year that they both had changed. The blonde ball of joy and sunshine had become quiet and serious, and she had turned inward and tuned out all who she couldn't remember, save the Hokage. She began to walk alone, just like Naruto. So of course Kurenai had made a big stink about her helping in the training, and she, in turn, saw it as an opportunity to force Kurenai into buying her all the dango she wanted. Win-win. Still, in all the years that she had been in the village, she had never felt a quake like that. In all the time she had spent following the little boy, watching how he grew, she had never felt that kind of power come from him, or this place. Chapter 3, Introductions. So it is said of the Dishret, the first great empire of the people, that it did endure the horror of the great sundering, that it did thrive through the withering. Translated from the hieroglyphics at the Pillar of Remembrance. Finally it was the day Iruka had been waiting for. Finally, after all these years, it would be over. Sasuke Uchiha would be gone. The only things that had bothered him more in his life as a ninja could be counted on one hand. 1. The Fox's attack and the subsequent death of his parents. 2. The death of his teammate and crush Atsuko during his first Chunin exam. 3rd, Naruto's change from the bright spot of his day into driven individual he was these days. 4th, and lastly, the fact his best friend, and last teammate, had tried to kill him. Beyond those moments, and certainly not as bad by comparison, was the Uchiha prodigy of the class. He had to fight back the urge to snort. Prodigy, what a joke, he can't even activate his Sharingan. What kind of shit is the council trying to push on us? Hinata isn't considered such a thing, and she has access to her bloodline already, not to mention that she could best him in almost every sparring match. It had been one of the things that had irked the last Uchiha to no end, but the fact that he had cared more about ninjutsu had tempered things slightly. Still, all the boy ever did was brood his schooling away. Even before he had lost his family, he had been obsessed with catching up to and surpassing his brother. Now it had just evolved into a desire to kill him. It was all so tiring, and the most frustrating thing had been the fact that there really had been people that could have bested him in every way should they have simply have applied themselves. Hinata, Shikamaru, Shino, Naruto, and Tenten. Hell, if they had just gotten over their fanaticism, then some of his fangirls could have done the same. He would be the first to admit that being able to pull off the fireball technique at his age was most impressive, but one jutsu does not make a shinobi. Even the 4th, famed for the flying thunder god technique, was known for more than that. Still, the papers were processed, damage done. The boy's ego would inflate some, maybe knocking him out of his brooding state, and beyond that he had been hand-chosen by High-Take Kakashi, arguably the most famous ninja currently in the village. The boy would, or at least should, be thrilled. Taking one last deep breath, the last he would have to do for this class, he straightened his shoulders, adjusted his file, and slid open the door. Only to be met with bedlam. There, standing before him seemingly trying to get up the stairs to a seat, was a truly strange figure. He seemed to be wearing the same basic outfit as Naruto, however, this person had on a strangely feminine mask, a marble-looking thing that seemed to have been stained by rivers of tears down its cheeks. In the man's right hand was a massive golden staff, the thing giving the appearance of royalty, one apparently connected with birds. Lastly, in the man's left hand, or rather on it, was a long golden armlet, the thing stretching from his elbow, across the top of his hand, to extend down his pointer and middle finger almost a full 2 feet past the ends of the digits, making them look like vicious claws, creating both a shield and a weapon in one. The man turned slightly, looking over his shoulder to regard Irika for a moment before he spoke. Irika-sensei, it is good to see you up and about again. If you would, could you deal with those that block my path? Naruto? He gave a slight nod. What's with the mask? A part of him was hoping it was a prank, that some part of the boy was coming back, and all of you, why are you trying to stop him? Indeed, it had been a surprising group standing before the team. It had appeared to be most of Sasuke's fan club was there on the stairs, but the thing that really surprised him was that Tenten was the one at the forefront of the group, and behind the blonde had been Kiba of all people, his hands curved into claws and poised to strike. Naruto calmly raised his clawed hand and touched his cheek. This mask is of my goddess Irika-sensei. I wear it to honor her. Now, if you would tell these people to take their seats, or at least allow me to pass, I would be most appreciative. That seemed to throw most of the class for a loop. Naruto, had religion. Alright everyone, take your seats, and we can get started. But-sensei. He doesn't smell right. That can't be Naruto. That caused several eyebrows to shoot up. When it came to such things, Kiba was infallible. Unseen by the group, Irika slowly slipped into a fighting stance. Most of the class's attention focused on Naruto. Even the Uchiha was staring at him with suspicion. I see Shino? Hinata? You are two of the best trackers in your class aside from Kiba, what say you? Sensei, his chakra tastes no different to my insects, though it feels old or stale. Hinata made a quick hand sign, not bothering to turn her head. Byakugan. Her body stiffened, then she let out a keening wail, causing most of the class to take a step, or in some cases a scoot, away from Naruto. Others seemed ready to strike. Before Hinata slumped forward slightly, her bloodline deactivating, Irika was by her side in a moment. A kunai in hand as his eyes darted from the stunned girl to the teen that stood a short distance away. Hinata. What's wrong? And Naruto-san, his chakra is exploding out of him, like he can't contain it. But it is Naruto, isn't it? She gave a shaky nod. Kiba, how does he smell different? He smells. Kiba. He smells like the dead. That, if anything, made the class move further away. That was because I was in a tomb, Kiba-san. You would have had to have spent days in one to smell like that. Cold blue eyes focused on the slightly feral teen, causing him to take a quick step back even as his hands flexed slightly, cracking the knuckles. Because I was in one for days since our graduation, I've been in prayer. Now remove yourself from my sight. The class shivered, his chakra flowed, and the eyes of his staff flickered. For one, Hinata Hyuga, who had triggered her bloodline once more, seeking to see just how much chakra was flowing through him, gasped, the sound swallowed by the collective sound of the class, for her eyes had seen, just for a second, the shaded image of an elaborate crown. And sunken, withered flesh. Kiba! Stand down, now Naruto, control yourself. At once Naruto snapped a quick salute, the staff making a dull thud, as though he bore armor under his cloak, then turned to move up the stairs only for Tenten to stop him once more. He sent her another of his cold stares, though his body language was of one who was just tired of it all. What do you require of me, Tenten-san? Tenten crossed her arms over her modest bust. I want an answer to my question. Where did you get that claw? That is none of your concern. Her eyes turned pleading. Come on, you can tell me. What about all good times we had? His once relaxed posture suddenly turned rigid, his form regal, almost superior air surrounding him in an instant. What good times? You heeded the warnings of the orphanage staff and stayed away from me. You, at their suggestion, didn't attend the matron's funeral, and then never once tried to visit me. I owe you nothing. Now, I'm attempting to take a seat. The girl flinched as though she had been struck, and quickly moved to an aisle seat, her eyes downcast and her form wilted. Naruto didn't spare her a glance, just moved to his seat and sat there, looking almost like he was on a throne. Irika looked at the two in mild surprise. He knew the two didn't really talk much, but that was more than a little cold, even for Naruto. Still, he cleared his throat before pulling the first file. All right, class, from this day forth. Two people flinched as the last only seemed to narrow his eyes. I'm with him? I'm with Naruto-san? Tenten, and the Hyuga interesting. Your sensei will be Kurenai Yahi. That made the blonde smile, unknown to them all, so the Hokage had allowed it. At least that's one person I think I can deal with. A woman! Excellent. No chance she'll favor the boy over us. Kurenai-sensei, the genjutsu mistress of the village. I fear I won't fit in that well here. The three were broken from their thoughts as a group of adults began to enter the room, the blonde in the back of the class standing the second he spotted the white bandages. Teammate, you're with me. Is that Naruto? What the hell happened to him? The way that Tenten shied away from the male member of their team was not lost on her, but from their files she hadn't seen anything that would hint at a dislike. She gave a mental shrug and attributed it to the sudden change in the blonde as they exited the school and began to make their way down the busy main street of the village, the path that connected the main gates with the Chunin Stadium. As they moved down the street, the looks and whispers that Naruto was receiving were not lost on them. None of the villagers understood just who this person was, but with the feminine mask, hidden from thanks to his cloak, and the gold he bore, they seemed to think it was another woman, causing glares from some and admiring stares from others. Some commented on the gold, either it being gaudy, the person having a lot of money, or others wondering if she was seeing someone. More commented on the mask, wondering if she was disfigured, or if she was just protecting her features. The three women of the group were trying their best to bite back their laughter. The male didn't seem to even notice, only now and again flicking the long claws against one another, making a distinct tone echo through the streets. "Sensei, where are we headed?" "We're going to a dango shop to meet up with our last member, an assistant I've arranged for." "Anko-san?" That caused three sets of eyes to lock on him. "How do you know Anko-chan?" "I believe you already know Kurenai-sensei, not to be disrespectful, but please do not insult me by thinking otherwise." Crimson eyes narrowed. "Humor me." He let out a tired sigh. "You both were well aware that I watched you when I was young, and after the trader left, Anko-san seemed almost obsessed with me for reasons I cannot fathom. To this day she will follow me, hide around my home, though I am happy to note that she has not made any attempts, to my knowledge, to enter. Though right now I need to confirm things with her about her location several nights ago." Tenten seemed to slip into a state of unease at the idea of them knowing Naruto already. Something that, in her mind, could lead to favoritism. "Oh? And why's that?" His head tilted slightly, a sad-looking bow even as his shoulders slumped slightly. "Someone destroyed something precious to me. I intend to find them, find out why, and kill them." 3 feet falters slightly. What will you do if she did do it?" A cold sweat broke out across their bodies as icy blue eyes turned to them. "Then she will not leave the restaurant." For her part, Kurenai looked scandalized. "You would kill a comrade?" "If she did act against me, then she is no comrade. Would you dispute that?" The boy had a point. Honor duels were not unheard of in the village. If a person was wronged, then they did need a way to solve those issues without resulting to clan war or outright murder. Still, the idea of Anko of all people destroying something important to anyone aside from Orochimaru was almost unthinkable, unless it was someone she was playing with. I wouldn't argue with that, but I'll tell you now it wasn't Anko. "Oh?" "She got back from a mission only 2 days ago, and was given that time off to recover and replenish her supplies." The teen gave a slight nod before returning his gaze forward, his regal stride taking over once more. "I see still. You'll understand if I confirm what you're saying, I trust?" "You don't trust our sensei?" While he didn't glare, he did stare at Hinata for a long moment. "Only a fool trusts a stranger blindly, Hinata-san." "But you said you knew them." "I watched them, Hinata-san. I thought they were pretty when I was young." Kurenai gave a mischievous smirk, time to see if he was just playing at being mature. "Oh, you don't think we are attractive now?" He didn't seem to fall for the bait, however. "As I said, you're a stranger, and physical beauty is the most fleeting, and the easiest to fabricate. It's meaningless, useless gilding on a weapon." Kurenai had to fight back a smile at that. "A man after her own heart, though Tenten's snort was hardly ladylike," says the boy with a gold stick. She stiffened as those eyes locked on her once more. She had a feeling that if looks could kill, that she would be a smoldering smudge on the ground right now. "You were touted as one of the greatest kunoichi of our generation, Tenten-san. That is from Irika-sensei's own lips. Yet you judge something by appearance alone, something that can easily get you killed. You disappoint me, Tenten. I wonder, did you join to be a warrior, or just to chase some pathetic bit of flesh like so many of your peers? You were held back once already. I wonder, how much of a distraction did that year's rookie provide? It was one Niji Hyuga, was it not?" That set the girl's teeth to grinding, her face flushing, either from embarrassment or rage they couldn't say. The fact she had failed her graduation test was a very sensitive subject for her. She had been unable to pull off the henge properly due to new seals she had sewn into her clothing to hold additional weapons, and it had cost her. And she would never admit to having a massive crush on the stoic, fate-obsessed boy, not ever, you arrogant prick. Arrogance? Not at all. I'm making observations and asking questions. The fact that I am disappointed in my findings is simply a point I was making. Shut up. As you wish. That one caught her off guard. Wah? He didn't answer, only pausing to get the door for the girls and his sensei before following them in. After a quick glance around, Kurenai spotted her target and gestured for them to follow. As they neared, the purple-haired woman smirked. "Kurenai-chan. Meet. It's good to see you all." "Anko. Meat?" Her smirk turned into a leer. "Oh, ya buns, you're all meat, nice, tender meat." Two seemed to shudder at her almost hissing, yet somehow purring voice, though the masked one was unreadable. Instead, he stepped forward and pulled the chairs off for the trio, surprising them further before accepting the gesture. 3 minds echoed the thoughts of this being a good/nice/attractive thing, and one thought nothing. As the boy seemed to hate her already in her mind, and was just going through the motions, for Naruto, he just calmly sat, his staff propped against his shoulder. Well then, now that we're all settled, pick what you want to order and we'll do a round of introductions. All involved nodded and said about their orders, some getting dango, some soup, though for one he ordered nothing, simply saying that he'd already eaten, something that they doubted by the way he kept glancing towards the door. Now then, let's get started. If you like, I'll go first. I am Karina Yehi, Jonin sensei to you all. My likes are spicy fish, sunsets, and trying new kinds of drinks. I dislike those that will judge on appearance and cake. There's just something about the texture. She gave a little shudder. My hope is to turn you all, my first genin team, into a powerful group that will leave a lasting impression on the village. My dream for the future, I wouldn't mind to settle down and have a family one day, though that is far away at the moment. The newly graduated students gave nods and smiles before all eyes turned to Enko. What? I'm just a helper, you don't need to know about me. Enko. She let out an annoyed huff. Fine, I'm Enko Mitarashi, special jonin and second in command of the TNI division. I like dango, sake, red bean soup, tea ceremonies, and my job. Her smile was not comforting. I really don't care for pricks that judge without getting to know you, spicy food, and a certain trader of the village. Hopes and dreams, that's for me to know. More nods before all eyes locked on Hinata, making her shift nervously. And my name is Hinata H. Hyuga. I like cinnamon rolls, my little sister, and my cousin, and flower pressing. I dislike some of my family's practices and shellfish. My dream is to one day unite my family properly. Kurenai gave something of a sad smile, as did Tenten, though the others just nodded before facing the bun-haired Kunoichi, who let out a sigh. I'm Tenten, no surname. I like learning about new weapons and styles, Tsunade-sama, fortune-telling, and dumplings. That made Enko perk up, and Kurenai smirk. I dislike pickled plums. Those that look down on women and think they're weak, and I'm really starting to dislike him. Naruto didn't respond. My dream is to one day meet Tsunade-sama, and if I'm lucky, train under her. More smiles and nods. Then came Naruto. I am Naruto Uzumaki. I like studying history, learning of my adoptive people, and training. I dislike those that judge others without knowing them, and I'm currently hunting a person or a group who has wronged me and mine. My dream, to right that wrong, and be an effective leader. Enko's grin turned almost feral even as the others looked confused at some of that. Oh, so the big strong man is going to lead us? Going for Hokage, eh? Gender has nothing to do with it, and if I must be Hokage then I shall, though that's not the only option. That caused a few raised eyebrows. You're saying you would leave the village? He just gave Enko a neutral look. Tell me, Enko-sensei, if you live in a place that would deny you your dreams, wouldn't you leave? Also, before you all get worried about what I have said, I know that I can't be a true ninja yet. If it were this easy to become a ninja, then our ranks wouldn't be as thin as they are, and the mortality rate would be much higher. Why would you assume that? Simple. If all those among Sasuke or Niji's fangirls were truly made ninja, then I would expect there to be a marked increase in the number of funerals in this village, which is not the case. Only one nodded, as Kurenai and Enko didn't know much about the situation, though the mumbled sexist bastard was picked up, and much to her cringe was answered. You think me in the wrong, Tenten-san? You're telling me that if some of those girls went up against even something as weak as bandits, that they would survive? I think they would kill maybe one, then freeze when they realized what they did, then would be captured, raped, and murdered. If it was a missing nin, or a rival village, even more would fall, and give up potentially vital information before meeting the same fate. Assuming they don't have a bloodline, then they would be kept. That did silence her. She had to admit that he was right, and it wasn't just the girls. There had been a few boys that had joined just for the chance of catching a girl's eye. That hadn't ended well. You have a point, but that doesn't mean I'm wrong. Nor does it mean you're right. So, when is our next test? Kurenai-chan? Yes, Enko-chan? I think I'm going to enjoy this team. It had taken the group several long hours before they were done with the initial meeting, something that annoyed Naruto to no end, as one of three things was constantly happening. Either Tenten would be shooting him glares, Hinata constantly staring at him like he was some great mystery, or Enko would be trying to just be as close to him as humanly possible, including one moment, after the sake started flowing, of trying to accidentally drop into his lap. Though the worst was when Enko had tried to take off his mask, that resulted in his current walk home, and a good bit of pain for Enko. Pain that wasn't his fault, and that he did feel bad for. The buzzed Kunoichi had made a grab of the mask and, much to everyone's shock, a black blur had lashed out from under his cloak and stabbed her hand. At her pained yelp, and ripping off of the cloak, they had been shocked at what they found. Naruto's normal clothing was buried under a thick layer of armor, the whole of the breastplate formed out of thick, crimson-looking gold, precious stones, and carvings, the majority of them showing similar birds to that found on the staff, armor the likes of which they had never seen before. Most of the upper chest looked as though someone had made a great circle of these feather-like plates, then just draped it over his shoulders, his head through the donut hole, as the interrogator had called it. From there down it was a collection of my stylized plates that formed a kind of coat, ending at a skirt of sorts that went to his lower thigh, just above his knee, that was met with greaves that went from the kneecap to the top of his foot and ensured that, all in all, nothing from the neck down on the boy was truly at risk. Indeed, the only true bits of skin that could easily be seen were on his arms, and even then, only really the right one. When he was asked, he simply said that he was ready for the test. But that wasn't the thing that truly interested Enko. No, it was the rather large, skittering scorpion that was currently perched on his chest, its claws pointing dangerously at her as they snapped now and again. She'd made a new friend. Though, judging from the odd burning she felt in her limb, she had a feeling she needed to get to a doctor. Now. But hey, he finally got to go home, and with a parting message to meet at a remarkably close location to said home, he knew he would be able to get just a bit more sleep. The next day seemed to come all too quickly for him, however, the cool steel-gray dawn still something he was getting used to, as typically at this time of day he would be training deep inside his home, but now his men had taken to the halls, rank upon rank filling the area even as some of the chambers were being cleaned of sand, freeing more and more of the withered soldiers. Even now he wondered just how many slept beneath his feet. Shaking his head to clear it of such thoughts, he replaced his mask, took up the staff and stood at the tomb's entrance, taking a moment to hop, and with a quick hand grab, used the momentum to swing onto the roof of the tomb's entrance. After a long moment of looking towards the horizon, seemingly waiting for the sun, he turned slightly, the staff already moving. A thin, almost unknowable line of blood trickled down one of the wingtips. Cold blue eyes met those of dark chocolate. "Tenten-san, to what do I owe this visit, and more to the point, how did you find this place?" Said girl swallowed thickly as her eyes locked onto the droplet that currently ran from her throat. Hinata said your chakra was exploding out of you. There aren't many places at this hour that would have that kind of power. That's how I found you. That single blue eye, almost glowing in the growing light. Tenten-san, I'm going to tell you something I have yet to reveal to anyone, though one other knows already. Do you think I can trust you with this? Not seeing any other option, she gave a shaky nod, wincing as the wingtip dug a little deeper. Very well. This place is my home, one that only one other knew of, and now you. This place is what made me what I am, and it is important to me, as it once held what was most precious to me. I want you to keep this place secret, and if you do I will see to it you are rewarded. Should you divulge this secret, she had a feeling that she already knew the end of that sentence. Again she gave a hesitant nod, only to get a slight shake of the head from him. No, Tenten-san, I want you to swear it, on this blood that is now flowing. Swear to me that you can keep this secret. Please show me that I can trust someone in this place. The weapon's presence should have mattered more to her right now, the slight nick on her neck, slight motion of the scorpion that was even now skittering around his shoulders, pausing now and again as though it was watching her. No, it wasn't the weapon, it was his eyes, and the cut of desperation to his voice. The mask had hidden it before to them, the group distracted by the odd items and his cold demeanor, but now, this close, it was clear as day. His eyes looked almost unfocused, the things narrowed and empty looking. The eyes of someone who had shed all the tears they had left. I promise, Naruto, I won't tell anyone. He eyed her for a moment longer before giving a small nod and withdrawing the staff, using the edge of his worn cloak to clean the bead of blood away. Now then, to what do I owe the pleasure? She shook herself and tried to order her thoughts once more. It was clear to her that whatever had happened had changed the teen. He had always been quiet in class, well, quiet after the matron's death, but yesterday's incident in class was unheard of. He had threatened Kiba, had said that he was willing to kill one of their teachers, and would leave the village if he couldn't accomplish his goals here. Everything before her screamed for her to run to the nearest ANBU and report him, if not take him down herself. Though at the same time, from what he had said, someone had wronged him, and he was seeking to find that person at all costs, even his career, even his dream. That was something that struck a chord with her. She had people cross her before. Many of the boys in her class had belittled her and the other girls after learning about some of the legendary ninja in their village, or more to the point, the fact that there had been only one, and she was still considered weaker than her male teammates. It had become her driving force in the academy. She pushed herself in weapons, ninjutsu, and compensated for her lack of skill in genjutsu by learning seals. Add to that now she had the village's foremost expert in the field as her sensei, and she knew that she would become great. Not for the first time she wondered what it would have been like if she ended up on Niji's team, one focused on the physical to the point of almost ignoring all else. She knew he was strong. Legends were told of the likes of Might Guy and Sharingan no Kakashi. But her current teacher, she wouldn't trade for anything, except for maybe Lady Tsunade, of course, and after learning this little bit of Naruto, of earning that sliver of trust, even if it was at knife or staff point, and she had hopes for this, hoped that with his help she could achieve her goals. Honestly, I was wanting to try and resolve things between us, and that seems to have happened. There was nothing between us, at least on my behalf. My weapons are my people's, and should not concern you. I do apologize if I come across as cold, but it is akin to the matron dying once more for me. I will find them, and I will deal with them. I understand in Naruto. For what it's worth, I'm sorry about everything. I know we never were very good friends, but maybe I will not sabotage your chances, Tenten-san. You have nothing to fear in that regard, and if you ever need assistance, then I will be more than happy to help. She gave the boys back a weak smile. Of course, what kind of leader would you be if you ignored your people? With that she leapt away, missing the slightly smiling eyes that gazed out over the forest. Yes, what kind of leader would I be? Chapter 4. And everything in its place. So it was said of Nagash the Accursed One, once first among the priests and greatest in learning, that he seized the throne from his brother, that he turned a number of the priests from the true path, that he did bring the withering and curse the people. May his suffering endure for all eternity. Translated from the hieroglyphics at the Pillar of Remembrance. Are you really sure they'll be able to handle this? Anko, I'm shocked. You of all people are usually the one to push for harsher tests, and now you question my methods? The special Jonin had to fight the urge to smack her friend. Most of the time Kurenai was one of the kindest, most patient people she had ever known. Even Yugao, the young up-and-coming sword mistress of the village, was known to act rashly at times. This is what set Kurenai apart from others. She could, and had, sat and wait for a target for days, hardly moving, using jutsu unconsciously to stave off some of the body's requirements for food, water and waste, pushing the body to lasting beyond levels that most could dream of. When it came to endurance, in regards to patience, only the Hokage was better. It was rumored among some of the Jonin circles that Asuma was trying so hard with her just to try and get her to sit down and play chess with him. However, the current obstacle course that she had developed was causing even her to wonder just what went on inside that pretty brunette head. The course had a timing to it, one that she could pick out rather easily. She had earned her rank after all, however. For fresh out of the academy recruits there was a good chance that they could be injured, rather severely at that. Then again, they were going to be a deep cover, recon and assassination team. Some of these things they were going to have to master in order to be able to breach a location, eliminate a target, or to gather the intel they needed. It was all rather basic when broken down into its simplest parts. First there was a barrier wall with wires and bells, the wires set to give a mild shock should they touch them. Their job was to bypass it. Next was a long section of mud with chakra-absorbing tags hidden throughout it. They had to make it through clean, and not setting off the tags, something that would latch onto the genin and glow brightly. The final two stages were combined into one trial. Kurenai had set up a genjutsu that simulated a house, a target, and a file. They had to get in, retrieve the file and eliminate the target before running the course in reverse. No easy task, especially when she knew that her friend was hiding something more about this place. The first to arrive on the scene was Hinata. The rather mousy thing was looking at the course with a hint of confusion lumped with just a bit of fear. Next was Tenten, who could only grin at the whole of it, though she seemed especially appreciative of the fabricated mansion at the far end. Last was Naruto, and if he was showing anything, they couldn't tell. Alright guys, here's the drill. Before you is a little test I've devised. The three of you will start here, progress through, and infiltrate the structure. Your objective is to eliminate all targets, retrieve the information, exit, and make your way back through the course. While I observe and judge, Anko here will be running interference. I have a layered series of illusions to help with the realism of this exercise, and trust me when I say that this is not beyond you. You are three of the best of your class regardless of what the teachers and your peers may say. When you pass, you will become fully accredited ninja. Any questions? Hinata raised her hand and got a nod. Time limit and intended target? Kurenai and Anko both smirked. 30 minutes. You need to get in, do the job and get out. Your target is a noble that will be within the mansion. Naruto raised his and got the same nod. Prep time? Anko clapped her hands once, a happy whoop echoing through the field. Hot damn, Kurenai. I swear you are a genius. To answer you, Naruto, we will give you 10 minutes to plot and scheme your little hearts out. Tenten was last, a loud ordinance. Another clap, though this was from Kurenai. Oh yes, she had chosen well. This is a simulated night op. Anything that may give away your position should be avoided. Flash tags, explosive tags, and excess amounts of chakra. Use your best judgment. Naruto again raised his hand. As we are operating under the assumption of this being a night op, shouldn't we be allowed either more prep time, or a chance to re-outfit before our attempt? Anko and Kurenai shared a smirk. Yes, very good Naruto. Thanks to everyone's careful questions you will be allowed an additional 20 minutes of prep. Use it wisely. 3 genin hopefuls gave a curt nod before dashing to the tree line. As Tenten and Hinata turned to Naruto to ask him about his weapons and armor, they were shocked to see him already stripping down to the odd loincloth he used for underwear. The two looked at him for a long moment, wondering what was going through his head for a moment before he flipped the robes inside out to show deep, midnight black cloth. Quickly his headband followed as he secured the mask to the sash at his waist before he pulled a small pouch from within one of his many pockets and started smearing something rather foul-smelling, greasy, and black over his face and hands. As he was finishing up, putting more of the substance on his claw before turning to his staff. Only Tenten realized just how unique the item was. It looked far too ceremonial to be a weapon, yet she had the mark to prove just how effective it could be. He held it aloft for a moment before touching it to the back of the armlet, several odd symbols glowing for a moment before the staff vanished in a flash of light. Another touch, and the elaborate armor he had replaced follows suit. Turning to the others, he watched them for a moment before tossing two more of the pouches to them. Hurry, we're running out of time, and we still need to observe the approach. What is this stuff? Cook fire grease, ashes, and musk from the glands of different animals. Enough to even confuse the best Inuzuka. He dropped into a crouch before pulling out 2 bits of hide and strapped them to the bottom of his sandals before he started tying all of the loose bits of his clothing, ending it all by wrapping a thick bit of cloth around his face and up to his head. Apparently that had been the purpose of the odd half-cloak he wore. All in all, with that kind of coverage, they doubted he would be seen even by them, and they knew what they were looking for. And the skins? One's rabbit, one's deer, again, musked. Now hurry up. Hinata went to work at once, her nose wrinkling at the smell, but not denying how effective it would be. Though she did wonder what her father would say. After a moment, however, she paused, looking at her own clothing with a frown only to feel something draped over her head before the sounds of cutting fabric were heard. Looking back, she gaped slightly to see he had pulled off the heavy brown cloak he wore and had tossed it over her and Tenten before the claw had apparently divided it for the two. Pausing to throw another few strips of cloth for them, he nodded, use that to wrap up and tie off. I think they were counting on us being very unprepared. I'm not one to be caught unawares. The two girls smirked as they went to work, the cloth easily doing the job to cover their tops. The both were wearing dark pants already. Your claw's good, but here, I keep a small supply of these to use with a shadow blade technique I've been practicing. The young brunette pulled a small brace of pitch black kunai from one of her leg holsters and tossed 3 to each, both Neen hopefuls stashing them in pouches. Seemingly not to be outdone, Hinata pulled 2 small containers of ointment from a pocket in her jacket. Here, it's a medical cream that forces sea clotting. If you get cut, you use it with Naruto-kun's masking agent. Again, 3 nods and they were ready to step out to the approach, the act shocking the 2 jonin into silence as they observed the trio. By far the most prepared looking was Naruto, his clothing seemingly made to be reversed for this role. Next to him, and with a rather quick-witted use of his cloak, were Tenten and Hinata, their clothing also streaked with some black substance to help break up their patterns. Not even that odd claw of Naruto's could be seen shining in the light. It was almost terrifying. The only things that really stuck out on the group were Hinata's bright, lavender eyes and Naruto's piercing blues, though his were toned down by the heavy cloth that covered most of his head. No genin should be this ready right off the bat, most especially not for a mission like this. Hey, alright, you know the rules. You still have 15 minutes to observe before the approach. Take your position and I will activate the illusion. The 3 moved into position with a nod before Anko grabbed her by the shoulders. Kurenai, this isn't easy for me to say, but I love you. You had to have picked the most promising group that I've ever seen. How the hell did you do it? She gave something of a cocky grin, something that really seemed out of place on the woman. Patient observation, Anko-chan, nothing more. Well, if you're this good, I think you need to pick the teams more often. I mean, damn, if he had the armor, I'd say he was an ANBU, he already has the damn mask. She bit back a smile at that. Anko had a lyrical way with words at times. You better hurry up and get into position, wouldn't want to keep the meat waiting. With a feral grin she was off, and Kurenai had pressed a button hidden in her sleeve before she was running through hand signs. If Tenten had to use a single word to describe the last 10 minutes of the mission they were given, one that they had attempted to study before the word go, it would simply be annoying. At first, she and Hinata had thought this was going to be an utter failure even before the mission started, as Naruto's chakra was just as powerful as ever, yet the second they had gotten into position his signature had dropped to that of a civilian before they could even blink, something that left the 2 of them wide-eyed and gaping. When asked, he simply whispered something that sounded like 6 years of practice. The 3 eyed the new obstacle course that Kurenai had altered for them. Stretching out, seemingly too far, was a massive outer wall not unlike what encircled the Hyuga clan home. The thing looking to be a good 12 feet, sheer and angled to give an almost total lack of handholds. From the outside of the illusion, Kurenai had to fight the urge to laugh. Anko was currently cussing up a storm due to the fact that she was caught in it too, making her seem utterly lost in a massive clan compound. It's the little things in life you cherish. Back inside, the 2 kunoichi had their heads together whispering quietly, thankful for Naruto's clothing as the illusion had thrust them into a clear, moonless night. They could see the wire, the stuff looking barbed, to catch and tear at those that would try to scale it. Okay, first we need to. Tenten-san. They looked over to see Naruto kneeling beside the wall, his hands cupped to allow them to use him as a vault. We may not use chakra at the moment. I have another way for myself. The two glanced at each other before nodding and taking off at a sprint, planting a foot hand, and with his help they were over. Looking back at the wall, he saw the lines of the wire and, pulling a set of kunai, started jamming the blades into the plaster before he started his climb. Peering over the edge, he gave a quick hop and was in. The two looked at him in confusion. They had heard the blades and had an idea as to what it was. I know my own weight, and have done this before. Given the lack of knowledge on my part, one acted as the vault. They gave quick nod as Hinata pulsed her Byakugan now and again to see what this may hold and winced. This will be a problem. The courtyard is a trap mud made to look like stone. Beneath it are explosive tags on pressure traps. There look to be two approaches, both heavily guarded. I can guide us, but we may leave a trail when we get inside. This mud is a problem. Any distractions will alert the target. Naruto, do you have more cloth? His eyes widened slightly as he started taking off the upper section of his robe. As every bit of skin was being exposed, he was rubbing mud onto it in a thin layer. He tossed the cloth to Tenten, who quickly went to work with a kunai to make 3 sets of foot covers. With Hinata at the forefront, the odd trio were able to make their way across, ever so slowly. Kurenai smiled as she saw the group go to work, not expecting Naruto to sacrifice his shirt like that. But the damage was done, and now she was more than a little happy that Enko wasn't here. She seemed to have an unnatural obsession with the blonde, and if she saw him now, shirtless, ready to kill and skin slick with mud, well, even she had to fight back the urge to blush, so only Kami knew what Enko would have done. Still, they had made it past the mud trap, and right past Enko, who was still thinking she was on the other side of the compound, scouting one of the approach paths that she had laid out for her with the help of the friendly guards. The 3 genin looked at the structure again, using the sides of the standard kunai as a mirror to look into the lower windows of the building. The thick wooden beams were still going to bar their entry, but at least for now there was a way of scouting the lower floor. Hinata, where is the target, and is the package nearby? The package is in a room guarded by 2 men, both inside and by the window. There looked to be 2 targets though, one on the main floor, one on the 3rd. What room is fancier? The one of the 3rd floor. Naruto shook his head at that. We don't have the luxury to pick only one of them to kill. Hinata, are there any others in the mansion? Guards patrolling the main staircase, most looked to be out on the grounds. She had to fight back a pained groan. Her eyes were starting to hurt badly. Our best bet right now is to secure the package, then to take the uniforms of the dead guards. One will hold the room while the other 2 move to eliminate the targets. Both nodded before they glanced to each other. Who will stay behind? Hinata. B. You've used your eyes too much right now, and we'll still need you to get us back out. Stay there and rest, we'll be fine. She gave the bun-haired girl an appreciative smile, and with that the trio started skirting the side of the building, ducking now and again as one of the wall patrols came into view. For Kurenai, she honestly had to ask herself what the academy had been thinking when they had put these teen toward the bottom half of the class rankings. Already they had managed far better than she had thought them capable of. Instead they were acting like this was no mere test, but that they were already ANBU and moving in for a proper, high-profile kill. Well, ANBU would have better means, yet still it was admirable. 3 shadows, unseen by 2 men, flitted by the window. Oh, I said to him, wrecked them? Damn near killed them. The man beside him let out an annoyed sigh. Hero, seriously, you have to stop with the jokes. Just once, can't we have a quiet shift? A long, pregnant silence was his answer. Again he sighed. Look, sorry, it's just my wife has B. He turned to his partner, ready to continue his own tale, only for his eyes to widen in horror. Long, glittering wires were wrapped around the man's throat. His eyes wide in horror, the whites replaced by blood as the wire sliced his throat, the wooden bars of the window acting as the tether that was keeping the man upright. His mouth opened to shout the alarm, yet no sound came forth, a dull pressure in his side the only clue that he had already been killed. His mind simply had yet to realize it yet. 2 blurs and the wooden slats that made up the bars of the window were gone, and 3 forms ghosted into the room. Impressive weapon, Naruto-kun. Noting he 2 very small holes in the wall where the claws had slipped through the plaster, as though it was butter. He gave a silent nod before moving slowly to the package, the long talons running through the air above the thing before he froze. Wires 10-10, do you see where they lead? Hinata, pulse your bloodline once more to ensure these are the right documents. The 2 gave a curt nod as they went to work, Hinata stepping closer to look at the papers within, only to freeze just like Naruto had. Explosive notes. Tenten had traced the wires to slightly raised platform. It seemed if the wires were released the panel would depress and set off a secondary trap. Move back slowly. Hinata, did you see any special walls, a safe, anything? She gave a silent nod. whispering safe even as Naruto had moved back and started removing the uniforms of the guards, thankful for the wooden half-masks that covered their faces, the things in a slight lion motif. Alright, Hinata, take a moment to rest, Naruto and I will move to the other targets. After you've rested, start on the safe. She gave a shaky nod as her teammates slipped on the uniforms, took up the spears that the soldiers had used and slipped out into the hall. Kurenai gave a low whistle as she saw the two deal with the guards. Granted, they were only illusions, but it was still one of the more realistic ones she had used, from one of her own early missions. Tenten's use of the wire was masterful, and the pure power that claw had demonstrated, even if it was all fake, the mind should have still added the resistance of the weapon to the wall. So either he had never used it on a surface before, or it really was that sharp, both very real possibilities in this instance. She watched with a smirk as the two moved to the first room and started chatting with the guards. Time for one of the first real trials. Hero. Oh, thank Kami. Tell me a joke or something. Talking to Riku is like arguing with a wall, said man. Riku just scowled at his partner. Hiro's eyes smiled as he thumbed the man next to him. Unseen by all, Hiro's throat muscles were working slightly before speaking. Can't be worse than fucking his wife. Damn, I think a sheep would have been more eager. That set the two to laughing so hard they doubled over even as Tenten gave him her best scowl, one not entirely fake, before they delivered a harsh chop to the backs of their necks. Really? A sheep? It worked. Slip inside and deal with the target, then we'll put these two in with him and move upstairs. Kurenai herself was almost doubled over. This planned problem with the test had almost utterly backfired on her, as when she doubled over so did her illusions, allowing them to disable them easily. She didn't know where Naruto had learned voice control like that. But she had a feeling it was a way to help make sure he could buy things in the stores. She knew quite well how the teen was ignored, so masquerading as another was a good option. Tenten gave 2 quick taps on the door before Naruto was in, dragging the 2 guards with him. Target eliminated. How? Throat, why? Pick a number between 1 and 3. What? Why? Just do it. She grumbled, mumbling about stupid blondes. 3. He gave a curt nod before moving in, his hand flexing a moment before his talons lashed out, carving into the man's forehead. Looking closer, Tenten's eyes widened. Why did you do that? There, prominently on the man's forehead, were 4 vertical lines. Misdirection when they find the body. Let's move. 2 more quick jabs from the claw to the guard's temples and the deed was done. Tenten looked at the blonde with more than a little fear. She knew, on some level, that this was all a test, a trick, but the way he had so casually dealt with the guys, while framing another village, it was shocking. She gave a silent nod before they moved back out into the hallway. Now the Jonin was truly flabbergasted. The killing of the guards was easy to understand. They knew going into this that those were illusions, but the attention to detail in trying to frame another village was just pure genius on the blonde's part. In her mind, even if they failed at this point, they would pass. She saw that Hinata had already gotten the safe open, her eyes letting her see the tumblers locking into place as she worked the combination lock before taking a seat by the window, taking the chance to drink a bit of water before just sitting with her eyes closed. Okay boys, time for the guard change. Why, Hiro? Why are you relieving us? It's 3 hours until shift change. Our lord orders and we obey. Sent the others out too. Just between you and me, I think he's calling in some entertainment, and doesn't want the missus to know. The 4 chuckled at that before nodding, though they looked confused that they weren't following them out. At that, Tenten spoke up for the first time, her own voice dropped several octaves. We're just going to let the double know that we're heading out, don't want him thinking there is anything wrong. Sounding the alarm and letting the whole clan know. What's wrong with you, Rika? You sound wrong. He cocked his head slightly at that. Rika? He's already left. Damn, you can't tell the difference between us with these masks? The man gave a small laugh. Sorry, sick, had to check, you just sound off. Hiro let out a laugh and clapped Sick on the back. Yeah, he's screwed up with the wife again. That made the 2 wince. Oh man, sorry, Shiori's beautiful and nice and all, but man, I don't know how you put up with her temper. He shrugged. The makeup sex is great. That set them all off again before the guards moved off and Naruto shot Tenten an eye smile. Well done. She returned the smile and the 2 were off once more. Another dirty deed, another carved symbol, and they were back to the room with Hinata. The duo smiling upon seeing the package sitting in her lap as she rested. Alright, job's done, let's go. Hinata, do you think you will be alright to get us out? She gave a nod. Alright, let's move. After a quick look outside with the edge of a kunai, the 3 slipped back out into the night, the package held firmly in hand. Unknown to them, a set of pupilless brown eyes were watching from around the bend. With a small wave the person gave their signal. Then everything went to hell. Currently Hinata was doing her best to dodge half a dozen large snakes, each almost the size of a panther. All thoughts of stealth were thrown to the wind as they were in a mad flight from the scene of their crimes. Right now Tenten was busy with several of the guards who had shown up, wires and snaring spears, kunai and shuriken lashing out to slice the heads from weapon, strike tendons and sever arteries. Naruto, however, was attempting to deal with the larger threat. Currently he and certain violet-haired jonin were engaged in a shockingly deadly-looking exchange, both weaving back and forth in the thick mud as though entwined in some perverse dance. A kunai flashed, looking to catch his cheek only to be sliced in half by a dark claw. A low, sweeping kick that sent up a small wave of mud even as she tried to take the blonde's foot out from under him. He hopped into the air, but it wasn't enough to save him from getting a face full of the muck. However, the thick cloth saved him from the worst of it. Still, it was enough to cause him enough pause to let her tackle him bodily to the ground. You know, Naruto-kun, it would be a lot easier if you just gave up. I could even guarantee you a place in our ranks. Cold blue eyes met earth and groan. You truly think that I would abandon them? Her body stiffened as his talons pressed lightly against her throat. Oh, but they think so little of you. Do they even remember your last name? Your favorite color? Do they even know where you live? What your life was like? Her words were a low purr, her hips grinding gently into his even as she pressed closer, seeming to delight in the small nicks that appeared on her throat, her eyes becoming unfocused with desire. No, they don't. But then again, neither do you. His voice dropped to a husky whisper. I know you've been watching me, Anko-chan. That you know where I live, that you have some small inkling that there is something more to me. You're right, you know, but just what that is a secret that I cannot tell you yet. Perhaps one day, though, I may even be able to deal with your little problem. Her eyes widened in horror as his claws ghosted down her neck to the junction where her neck met, the tips pressing gently, slicing open her coat and biting through her armored mesh like it was paper, the points resting gently before circling the mark, sending an odd thrill down her spine. It's strange, there is great power sleeping here, power not your own, like you were branded somehow, but I sense something amiss with it. How her voice was silenced as his knee found her midsection, sending her tumbling over his head to roll through the mud. With a quick kip up he was on his feet and moving, one hand a blur as he sent a brace of shuriken cutting through the night and biting deeply into the snakes, making them vanish in a cloud of smoke. Moving in he tossed Hinata over one's shoulder. Hinata, guide me, now! Fighting back her shock at it all, she activated her Byakugan and started barking directions, leading them closer to Tenten, who had somehow been driven further away from them, towards the wall. Still moving fast, he saw Tenten drop the last of her foes before Naruto threw her over his other shoulder, his gait slowing alarmingly as lanterns began to be lit all over the compound. And Naruto, what are you doing? You can't run with us both. Quiet. You'll bite your tongue. Even as he charged bodily forward, his steps faltered slightly, the sting of metal biting into flesh overriding his senses, Hinata's keen eye the only one to catch it. Forcing muscles to act, he finally reached their last barrier to freedom. And Naruto-kun, your legs. Tenten's eyes went wide, there looked to be 3 shuriken in each leg. He just shook his head and cupped his hands once more. I'll catch up, get going. There isn't time. We're not going to. Either you jump or I'll knock you out, throw you over and make Hinata drag you home. Now go. Why, you better be right behind. He gave a nod to the bluenet before helping to toss her over, Tenten quick to follow. He spared the bun-haired girl an unseen smile as he turned back to a mud-caked Anko, his free hand coming up to his armlet and unsealing his staff even as the long talons seemed to retract. Another press and that odd, shining armor was upon him once more. The snake user's eyes widened as, even on shaky legs, he assumed an intimidating stance. Right leg forward into a deep crouch, the staff held aloft as the left hand was brought forward to the perch of the carrion bird. Going to sacrifice yourself for your friends? His voice was teasing. Would a good king do anything less? She let out an almost mocking laughter. A king now, are you? Just yesterday you were in genin hopeful. Do tell me, what do you lord over, O king? Almost glowing blue eyes narrowed to bare slits, his lips had parted to answer even as they were both forced to their knees in searing pain as the dead of night vanished into the light of the coming dawn. Their test had come to a close. For Tenten and Hinata it had been more than a little surreal. As their feet had touched the ground on the other side of the wall, the illusion had dissolved, quickly reminding them that this was far from the life and death situation that their minds had made them believe. They were back in that oddly cleared field with the severed trunks, gone were the massive, imposing walls and mine-ridden courtyard, replaced with a simple wooden wall and slick and mud pit that currently had Naruto and Anko facing off in it, Naruto taking his shaky stance, ready to fight to death to slow Anko down enough for them to get away. The massive mansion becoming a simple wooden shack. With a snap of her fingers the illusion had faded into the world around, a massive release of chakra tainting the area and alerting many to the goings-on of the group. Far away, on the other side of the village, a silver-haired jonin looked up from his book and very nearly caught a fist in the face courtesy of the Uchiha. Elsewhere a man with a cigarette looked up from his shogi game and missed a young blonde teen moving one of his pieces of space to the left, causing his opponent to smirk. Lastly a man in green spandex missed a step and took a fall, and by his own vow went in search of a boulder before beginning to climb the face of the Hokage monument. Forcing himself to his feet, Naruto, logically, know that there were no injuries to his legs, yet the tricks played on him by his own mind were screaming at him that he had been stabbed in the legs, that he needed to seek medical attention or at the least lay down. He fought it off. For Anko, who had been trapped as well, although not injured, she was still feeling the sudden loss of equilibrium due to the changes in scale and shift from night to day. Not much fun. All right everyone, bring it in. 4 sets of eyes locked on the brunette before moving in, one hobbling before dropping to the ground before her, the 3 girls quick to check on him and make sure he was okay. Kurenai's smile was less than comforting. Are you having a problem, Naruto-san? Narrowed eyes met hers, though his voice sounded slightly jovial. You are quite good at genjutsu, Kurenai-sensei. Now her grin was a genuine one. Why thank you. Now can you tell me what you did wrong? Any of you? Silence was her answer. Yet her smile never faltered. Good answer. That caused a few confused looks. Kurenai-sensei, why do you mean? Hinata, given your situation, with the information you had on hand, you acted almost perfectly. For those more skilled, or permitted to use chakra, then you would be able to have gotten in and out without the secondary kills. As it stands, you were perfect for an assassin or spy that didn't have ninja training. Tenten, you recall the boy in your class that couldn't use chakra, correct? She received a nod. This is not unlike how he would have had to act. That portion of the test was to see if you relied too heavily on your chakra. The only amounts you used were the small pulses needed for Hinata's bloodline. You were also able to avoid the traps initially until we turned the tables on you. How do you mean? You didn't find it odd, Tenten, that Anko found you suddenly like that? That the guards just seemed to keep coming? And now that you mention it. Yes, there was a second layer of illusions that I triggered upon your escape, and allowed Anko to try and slow you down, within reason. Now Naruto, I would like to commend you on your willingness to sacrifice yourself for your teammates, but I must ask, what were you thinking by trying to carry them all out of there? They are kunoichi of the village, you need to trust in their skills. Naruto was silent for a moment before looking to Tenten and Hinata, the former looking more than a bit annoyed while the latter looked emotionless. Kurenai-sensei, I do not think badly of Hinata-san or Tenten-san. I simply knew that Hinata had already strained herself in battle and should expend her power guiding us, and you Tenten, if I had let you follow or lead it, could have resulted in a tripping of the minds, or you being stuck and falling. And with me already carrying Hinata, I was unsure if I could turn back in time to render aid. Afterwards I knew my injuries would have only slowed the others down, so I turned to fight. I said that I wanted to be a leader. Well, a good leader is the first one in, and the last one out. In this instance I couldn't be the first in, so I was at least going to be the last out. But Naruto-kun, we could have all made it if you had just trusted us. Hinata-san, I did trust you, to guide me, but you were already in pain and tiring. By acting as I did, I was hoping that you would have the energy to escape. And me? You had fought harder against those guards than Hinata or I did against our opponents combined. Really, all it boiled down to is that I made a judgment call. It allowed you both to get away. It may have been incorrect in hindsight, but in that moment the act was done, and I stand by it. The 4 women looked at the boy in mild shock. They were expecting him to kowtow in some way, or to at least apologize to them. The way any other boy may act when faced with a group of angry, or at least accusing, women bearing down on him. Instead he held firm to his stance and refused to budge, earning a begrudging respect from the crimson-eyed jonin. Alright, well, all that aside, I must admit that I'm quite impressed. Anko? The woman gave a nod. At no time did they give away their positions to either myself or my snakes, something that actually confused the hell out of me. How did you guys trick them? It wasn't until the end, when they could see you, that you were in danger of them. Naruto's smirk was hidden from view as he tossed a pouch to the special jonin. Looking at it in confusion for a moment, she dipped some out and almost immediately regretted it. It smelled foul, was greasy, and even as she tried to wipe it off it spread further over her skin. What the hell is this? My masking agent works quite well, wouldn't you say? Run very hot water over it and scrub when you get home, it will come off. 3 heads nodded at that. This stuff was going to be a pain, but it was indeed effective. Another question, why did you mark the targets like that? Misdirection. When they would be discovered, the only clue they would have would point at another village. And why rain? Tenten picked 3. All the girls frowned at that. His shrug didn't help. What was 1 or 2? Mist and cloud. Before you ask, I chose villages that were unaffiliated with us, firstly, so sand was out, and rock was to be avoided, as if they were blamed they would have immediately accused us due to past grievances. And the others? Mist is currently still in their civil war, simple enough to blame them, as it could have been a rogue faction seeking funds, and trying to make trouble for the main forces. Rain has their border closed right now, but the rumors are saying that they are embroiled in an internal conflict as well. Cloud recently appointed a new Kage, again, it could be done to cause trouble for the new village head. For mouths hung agape at him, Anko the only one to voice it, hoo. He looked at her with slightly bored eyes, my history texts, listening to merchants, and a bingo book. They could only nod, too, wondering if they shouldn't have paid a bit more attention in history. Sensei, if I may ask a question? She nodded. Did we pass? Two voices began to laugh long and hard, to the point that Anko was very nearly rolling on the ground. It had gone on for so long that they were starting to wonder if they were being laughed at, or if the question had caused it. Finally Kurenai whipped her eyes, desperately trying to catch her breath. Oh Kami, that was good. Teammate, I am proud, so very proud to say that you, gloriously passed. Three teens had their faces split in grins, even if only two could be seen. That night, much to the shock of the genin, the alcohol flowed freely for all involved. Anko had been more than a bit happy to be the first to break their rice wine cherries, as she had dubbed it, and had insisted that all share the first round with her. Honestly, by the end of the night, they couldn't believe just how much sake the special jonin could put away, though the true shocker had been Hinata. The normally mousy girl had, by herself, finished almost a third of the massive bottle the snake user had bought. For Tenten, for being such a hard ass, she was a surprising lightweight, though still managed one of the small, private serving bottles, before she passed out face first onto the table. Kurenai, meanwhile, had been quietly sipping at her glass of deep, ruby red wine. For Naruto, he had taken the offered cup of sake, then no more. To him the stuff had a foul aftertaste, something that lingered in his tongue and made him long for a bit or grass, or anything, to chew on to rid him of the taste. In the back of his mind, the crown teased him with fleeting hints as to what the honeyed wines of his people could bring to bear on the imbiber, the glorious golden hues that would shine through a glass in the fading light of a day as the sun made its last, fleeting, grab at the red sands before vanishing into the sea. He shook his head to clear it of such musings. Already he was getting strange looks from ruby-eyed Jonin before she leaned a bit closer. Penny, for your thoughts? He gave her a small smile, something she could see reach his eyes, just an odd memory, probably something from a past life. The Jonin could feel a dull tendril of cold settle into the pit of her stomach. Memories from another could mean many things, especially from Tenet's. Oh, a pleasant one, I trust? Again he gave a small nod. A sunset by the sea, probably just the crazed imaginings of a boy. Pay it no mind, though I will admit, I would like to see the sea one day. That made her smile. A part of her thought that he may just be saying that as she had mentioned liking them, but from that far-off look he had held she knew better. Well, I'm sure one day you'll get to see it, and when you do I'm sure it will pale to your imagination. He smiled back at her, again his eyes showing it, but she also felt an odd sadness about him. I'm sure it will be wonderful, but I doubt it will eclipse my own thoughts, Kurenai-sensei. I envision such a thing surrounded by my people, loved and honored, not something terribly likely to happen, wouldn't you say? She hadn't even realized she had moved at first, a hand coming to rest on his shoulder even as their voices were drowned out by Anko and Hinata starting up an odd song, her comforting gesture hampered by the armor he bore under his cloak. Naruto, I know things are hard right now, but look at it this way. It can only get better for you from here on out. He turned to her with mild surprise before slightly sliding away from her touch. Kurenai-san, I'm sure you know about my situation. I know for a fact that Anko-san does, and I would have expected for her to have told you long ago. With such a thing bearing down on me, do you truly think I have any hope here? I had to hold a blade to someone's throat to make them promise not to betray my secret. I would have to somehow save the entirety of the village, probably several times over, to let them even begin to look beyond the scars of the past. I am no fool. I know what I mean to this village, a potential secret weapon and a deterrent for attackers, nothing more. At least you, Kurenai-san, have some small hope of being more than a tool for old men and women. She could only stare at him with wide eyes. And Naruto-kun, it's not like that at all. There's no way that the Hokage would just use you like that. He doesn't do that to any of us. A sad-sounding sigh met her ears as he placed a hand on hers, a part of her noting how dry his skin felt. Kurenai-san, I cannot change your mind with simple words right now, but later, when such a task is issued to you or another, where you are expected to give your life to slow the enemy or destroy a key position or person, remember me. Naruto, I would gladly do that to protect my free. That you, Kurenai-san, have something like that to fight for makes me envious. Now I hope you'll excuse me, we have missions to begin tomorrow, or rather, today, it would seem, and I will need some level of rest. Good morning, as it were, and rest well. Without so much as a glance back, the teen took up his staff once more and, despite his size and trappings, seemed to bleed into the throng of people the bar still held and vanished. Yet for Kurenai-Yuhi, she had to stop herself for continuing to look, wondering at just how far removed the boy felt from this place. For Naruto, as he made a snaking, back-alley path back to his home, he wondered if he hadn't been a bit too candid with his sensei. He knew that she was just trying to be kind, to comfort him and to reach out, and attempt to bring them all together as a team, but for him, he knew what it was that he needed to do, to find Megami's killer, and to ensure that they paid 1,000-fold for what they had done to her. So focused was he on his thoughts that he never saw the shadow that seemed to creep through the narrow passageway. Never did he see the wrinkled hands that snaked out from the small alcove that normally served as a place for refuse bins. He never saw the dull, faintly glowing violet eyes that followed him, even as a shockingly strong hand lashed out to grab his wrist before pulling him close, its other knocking aside the mask and covering his mouth even as it drew closer, and RUO. His eyes widened in mild horror as the face drew ever closer, old, weathered lips closing on his. His breath caught, he could feel his chakra flowing out of his body, suddenly feeling so very tired. The last thing he saw, before he felt the last dredges of his consciousness faded, a set of small, jade combs. Chapter 5, Day to Day. So it is said of the Sundering, that a great upheaval did rend the land, the seas boiled, fire and ice fell from the heavens, that gods walked the land and did smite the people, that their rage knew no bounds, that none could be stopped, only left to rage, until nothing remained. Peace be upon those that lived in such times. As the gods would not listen to their pleas. Translated from the hieroglyphics at the Pillar of Remembrance. 2 sharp knocks seemed to echo throughout the cavernous halls of the manor. A half-dozen stoic sentries interspaced the long shaded walkway that seemed to stretch on and on, didn't so much as glance up at the figure that stood before a large set of sliding doors, the entrance to a rather large office. Enter. The sound of polished wood sliding was almost deafening in the silent halls. 2 small strides, soundless, and the petite figure was now inside the room, the only true fixture being a massive hickory desk, darkly lacquered. The piece of furniture almost stretching the breadth of the room held several chairs, though none as high-backed as the figure that currently sat at its center. Several stacks of precisely ordered papers were before him as a brush danced artfully across the parchment. Across the man stood only one chair, something that would be occupied in the event of tribunals or, in this instance, when the dark-haired man had a guest. Only ever one at a time. There, just inside the doorway, knelt one Hinata Hyuga, her head bowed low and touching carefully positioned hands. There she waited until her father sent a small glance her way. Hinata. Still, her eyes didn't rise. You wished to see me, father? It was not a question. Yes, rise, you may take a seat. I wish to speak to you about your team. Yes, father. At once she rose smoothly, her kimono hardly shifting as she glided further into the room before dropping smoothly into the chair. Eyes still downcast as the man continued to tend to the document before him. Daughter, I've been told that your team consists of 2 orphans, is this true? Yes, father. One happens to have been last year's frontrunner for Kunoichi of the Year, correct? Yes, father. However, you beat her out for the title this year, correct? Yes, father. Yet you did not take the title yourself, explain. To the average person her flinch would be unseen, however, Hayashi Hyuga was not average, not by any means of the word, father. This year's Kunoichi of the Year was one Sakura Haruno. The girl was driven by her affections for the last of the Uchiha. In addition, there was speculation that her parents, the head of the Merchants Guild, were close with the headmaster. Speaking in terms of the physical, she was not noteworthy, and failed to impress constantly. That said, when it came to the academics she was remarkable. Iruka-sensei speculates that she could, due to her impressive ability, pass Chunin level tests as it stands. It was highly recommended that she peruse a role in teaching or the medical field. However, she is determined to garner the affection of her teammate, so that seems unlikely. If he had an opinion, then Hayashi didn't make it known. I see these 2 teammates of yours, their names? Tenten and Naruto Uzumaki. His brush paused for a moment, the act startling the young Hyuga. Nothing ever seemed to give her father pause. Almost as though he were trying to make up for the act, his brush redoubled its movements. Uzumaki-san, blonde hair, unique clothing. Yes, father. And your opinion of the boy? Father? She had to stop herself from looking up. This was becoming a day of firsts for her. Inquiring about her own skills and the ability of those around her was not uncommon. The Hyuga had to be considered the best after all, but an opinion was another matter entirely. I asked your opinion of the boy. He was once known for his rather energetic, if enigmatic, behavior. Now he simply has the latter. Even some of our best among ANBU have lost track of him in the past. It is known that he abandons his home after a time and heads to parts unknown, but that location has long been a mystery. I suppose if you must know, I am curious. Now her head did snap up, wide eyes boring into the man who did not look up for his documents. If her father was curious about someone, then it was usually something rather serious, either a threat to the clan or something that could potentially further it. Before her own kidnapping when she was young, it was said that her father was curious about the Kumo delegation, and almost sparked a war. Now he was being pressed for information about her own teammate. Father, all in all, Naruto-san seems to be focused, if not driven. He has alluded to someone having wronged him, destroyed something important to him, and he seeks to find that person or persons and deal with them. In class he was typically quiet, most especially after his 2nd year in the academy. Afterwards he became almost stoic and excelled in class while attempting to avoid drawing attention to himself. holding a firm position in the mid to lower section of the class rankings. That said, his stealth was second to none in class, and possesses an analytical mind that is remarkable. During our genin trial, he quickly and decisively led us to complete a mock mission in such a way that left our sensei speechless. I believe that he had simply decided he did not wish to stand out in class and did his best to avoid attention. During our trial, he had managed to force one of our sensei, Special Jonin Anko Mitarashi, into a stalemate with blades at one another's neck, and was ready to fight her to his apparent end to let us get away with the package. I see, and why did he have to do such a thing? In the course of the mission there was a number of unseen traps, and the use of chakra was limited. To that end I pulsed my Byakugan in order to remain undetected. The repeated activation of my eyes put undue strain on them, and to ensure that we got away he ordered us to go. At the time it was believed he was injured, so he made a judgment call to stay behind and slow the pursuers while I and Tenten got away, my eyes being needed to look for more patrols and traps. The man's brush stopped once more, twice in one sitting, was beyond shocking to the girl. Interesting, had the boy always been such a tactician? I do not know, father. As I said, he remained in the background for the most part, though that changed the day of team assignments. Explain. Father, that day he arrived in his normal outfit, however he had several new accessories, a stone mask fashioned like a woman, a long piece of armor on his left arm that ended in long claws, and a winged staff. Save the mask, they are seemingly made of precious metals and gems. In addition, under the clothing was an ornate armor, interlinked scales that were fashioned to look like feathers. I will admit, it makes for a striking appearance. Do you know where an orphan would have gotten such extravagant items? No, father. I see. When do you next see the boy? Training and missions begin tomorrow, father. Our meeting today was postponed due to our sensei's needing to meet with Hokage-sama. Silence filled the room as the man seemed to be in deep thought before he nodded to his daughter. Very well, that is all. Return to your chambers. As you do not have training with your team, you will spar with Hanabi in 3 hours' time. Use that to prepare. Yes, father. Without sparing a glance at the man, the young girl rose and moved out of the room, offering her father one last small bow before she retreated to her chambers, a place where she could moan in pain without interruption. She was never drinking again. So you're saying that Naruto is showing surprising qualities of leadership? That's good. However, his loyalty is in question. 2 sets of eyes narrowed at the old man. No, you're reading into it too far. I quote, "If you live in a place that would deny you your dreams, wouldn't you leave?" That is all he said. Yes, but you must admit, Kurenai-san, that it is disturbing to hear the potential is there. There is always potential, Hokage-sama. You yourself could leave today should you so desire. It's just not terribly likely. He let out a chuckle at that. I suppose I can't argue with that. And you, Anko, what is your opinion of the team? Hokage-sama, they are an exemplary group, one that I believe was overlooked in the academy if what I've seen is anything to go by. Hinata Hyuga's control of her bloodline was remarkable, and despite the illusion's complexity was able to safely guide her team in and out. Tenten's skills effectively held off multiple waves of enemies, and Naruto's misdirection would have left a real target searching for months for a true culprit. In addition, he managed to fight me to a standstill. Admittedly, I was hardly going full out, but it is still worthy of note, sir. The elderly leader let out an annoyed sigh. Since the start of this meeting, Anko had been as stiff and upright as a tree, arms behind her back in an only slightly at ease pose, and had been using his title and sir constantly. No smiles, no playing, no affectionate names or banter, just utterly cold and professional. Anko-chan, please, you can stop this, it's getting juvenile. Sir, I'm unsure as to what you mean. I have been on my best behavior since the start of the meeting. He gave a small smile. That's the point, Anko-chan. If anything, her eyes narrowed further, almost making her seem like the serpent her sensei associated with. Sir, you are Lord Hokage. I wouldn't want to put my loyalty in question by acting in any way that would make you look at me as anything but a loyal soldier, perhaps a tracking seal or an Anbutinwa. A quick spike of chakra was enough to silence her, though he didn't seem angry. If anything, he looked very tired. Enough, Anko. I know you are angry about our last meeting, but I have to look at the safety of the whole, not just the one. Sir, then why am I still here? If there is a potential threat, then it should be dealt with, be it a former master, a lazy ninja, one whose sanity is questionable, one whose drive could lead to madness, one who holds a position that could lead to favoritism, or those who are sick and could fall in battle. Why should one be singled when the potential is so great? I know he holds something dangerous, but there are a number of shinobi in the village that possess techniques potentially as destructive. Kurenai could only gape at her friend. She tended to forget that Anko was the prodigy of their graduating class, handpicked by Orochimaru to be his apprentice to all he knew. Her antics tended to make you forget what a keen mind she possessed. But should she ply herself, then her potential was far greater than that of even Sharingan Kakashi, who if he didn't have his eye would probably only be considered an average shinobi. Yes, he was skilled, but his reliance on that eye of his in the heat of it was not unknown to his peers. Anko-chan, surely that's going too far. I would never allow things to get so lax in the Ville. My lord Kakashi Hatake, chronically late, guy, challenging himself to the point of serious injury, Sasuke Uchiha, working towards killing his brother at any cost, Asuma Sarutobi, son of the Hokage, Hate Geku, lungs damage due to childhood illness. All are potential weak points and threats despite their skill and potential. That stunned the two to silence before the Hokage's eyes hardened like obsidian. Special Jonin Enko Mitarashi, are you attempting to sell out your fellow shinobi? She snapped a hasty salute. Sir, no sir, simply clarifying sir. Sarutobi let out a tired sigh. I see you make a good point on all counts, however, we are getting away from the topic of discussion. I trust that all right with you, Mitarashi-san. Sir, whatever you wish, sir. He growled at that but nodded. As we were saying, the team has passed and is ready to begin proper training. Were any new skills gleaned from your test? Kurenai gave a slight shake of her head. No sir, nothing beyond the report. I see, and did you get to ask Tenten about the clearing? No sir, we thought it best to wait until training, in the form of a test of knowledge. Very well. Thank you for your thorough report. You are dismissed. Two hasty salutes were snapped before they turned to leave. Oh, if you would, could you track down Naruto-kun for me? I wish to congratulate him on passing his test. Kurenai arched a finely sculpted brow. Sir, you don't wish to see Tenten or Hinata? He pulled out his pipe and started to stuff it with tobacco. Of course, I must be getting forgetful in my old age, please send for them. Yes, sir. He's plotting something, you know that, right? Enko. What? Come on, he's got something planned for the kid and you know it. You can't just say something like that, you know you're on thin ice as it is after your little fight in the office. If he found out you were questioning him now, She threw up her hands in frustration. I know. Damn it, I know, but he's had it hard enough as it is, and if he turned in his headband tomorrow then I think I'd probably be the only one to really miss him. I don't want him to go Naichan. Kurenai froze in mid-step at that. This was almost akin to Enko declaring her love for the boy. Enko, what is it that's going on between you two? She looked at her in surprise for a moment before pressing on, gently guiding her friend to the shop Tenten worked at. I don't know, somehow just being around him just lets me get my head on straight. I don't obsess over my lost memories. Of killing that bastard I can just be. And I'm at peace. I don't have feelings or anything for him, if that's what you're getting at. Don't you have anyone that you can just relax and be yourself around? After a long moment of her purple friend looking at her expectantly, she smirked and threw an arm over her shoulder. Yeah, one or two. The pair could only laugh at that before stopping before the rather modest-looking store. Okay, you get the girls. Naruto will be a bit hard to pin down. I'll go looking for him. I know his haunts. Kurenai arched a brow at that, the act becoming more and more common as of late. I'm sure I could find him if I were. Yeah, you could, but at the same time it would be faster if I did it, you know that. She let out a small chuckle. Alright, go find your boyfriend. The crimson-eyed Jonin never saw the smack to the back of her head coming. It's not like that. Sure. She let out a huff of annoyance before vanishing in a swirl of leaves, not able to drive the image of Kurenai's grinning face from her thoughts. Her own blush wasn't helping in the slightest. For Tenten it had been business as usual, at least for her part-time job, that is. First, when she arrived, she was to sweep the steps, then she was to polish the counter, clean her hands, then get fresh cloths before moving on to dusting and polishing the blades. After that she was to check the cloth wrappings on the weapons, making sure they were taut. Next came tending the forge, shoveling and brushing the furnace before restocking the area with coals and wood, realigning the hammers and getting the water and oil for the trough before opening the store. Then came the wait. That was the worst part. It was all well and good when things like the promotion exams were up, or the rotations came in from the remote outposts. Then it was busy, then she could largely blank her mind and just go through the motions. But when there was nothing going on, her mind would wander. And as with many, a wandering mind could go to some unique places. Like how she currently found herself, wondering what it was about her male teammate that had him hanging out in a cemetery when she had found him that morning. Where had he gotten those weapons, and just how was it that he was so powerful fresh out of the academy? While in the test she was dealing with the guards, largely laughable as opponents, only having the advantage of numbers. Then again, considering some of the techniques she had developed, she knew quite well the power of numbers. But Naruto, she had seen him manage to fight one of their sensei to a standstill only 4 days out of the academy, and from what she had seen it didn't have anything to do with those unique weapons. It was all skill and fighting style, remarkable speed for his age, a cunning mind that seemed to disarm Enko as much as his skill. Admittedly, she knew that the woman was holding back. She could tell from the levels of chakra that were in the clearing, but she had this bad feeling that he had been holding back a lot as well. Hinata had been a surprise for her. Having been used to her cousin Niji, she was expecting a cold aloofness from the girl, but instead she just seemed quiet and resolved to do what was needed in her life. Though how she was going to accomplish her dream of uniting her clan was a bit confusing considering how she seemed to be so proper, so in line with her clan's desires. Maybe she was just trying to lure them all into false sense of security until she was made head of her clan, then do what she was hoping to. Lunch came and went with her, making a trip out to get a small box of pork buns before rushing back, intending to eat in the store while looking at some of the more exotic weapons that the shop held, absently taking note of the rhythmic sound of metal being shaped in the back of the store. She had just returned to the counter when the door opened for the first time that day. At once she put on her rather plastic smile and turned to the front door. "Good afternoon, and WL-sensei?" Not for the first time Tenten was taken by the beauty that was her teacher. She wasn't one to be jealous, but she knew well that, with the Chunin rank, came the possibility of seduction missions, either for information or assassination, and only some of the best-looking or most developed of women were chosen for them. So to that end she had applied herself, learning some fashions and makeup, though she would be the first to opt for the role of combatant instead. Fortunately, unless it was of vital importance to the village, such missions were largely voluntary, and with the right application of drugs or poisons one would never have to go as far as sex. Still, knowing that those like Kurenai would be first on the docket as it were did sting her pride a bit. Then again, she still had a lot of growing to do. That was a comfort. Tenten-san, just the person I'm looking for. I don't suppose Shinji-san is in. I need to speak with him for a moment. The Hokage has requested our team in order to congratulate you on your graduation, so I need to see if I can't steal you away from him for a while." The bun-haired girl looked more than a bit surprised at that news. It was quite rare for the leader of the village to want to granulate anyone personally, much less a genin team. She sent a quick glance towards the back rooms that held the forge, assembly and polishing rooms for a moment before nodding. "I'll go get him now, just wait a moment." Kurenai smiled gently at the girl as she rushed into the back so fast she almost left a dust cloud in her wake. Ought to be young again. A few seconds later a surprisingly short man came out of the back room, though most of his upper body was heavily muscled, his sleeves tied so as to keep them back from the fires, and the immaculately white clothing, almost priestly in many ways, was flawless. Absently he mopped at a sweat-covered brow as he eyed the woman before him critically, his eyes lacking the lewdness that so many men would possess when it came to her. Cautiously peeking from behind the door frame was Tenten, the girl looking quite nervous. After a pregnant pause the man gave an almost invisible nod. "Shinji Kazuhara, at your service." "Kurenai Yuhi, forgive me for disturbing you at your work, but Lord Hokage requested her presence in his office. It shouldn't take more than an hour or two." The man turned slightly, the profile allowing Kurenai to take note of the bald man's features. His eyes were narrowed almost constantly, probably from long years working the forge, his skin looking tough and leathery from the heat, though the wrinkles around his eyes, one of the few things really betraying his age, seemed to be something born more from smiles than frowns. "Is that so? Well then, you better get going, little one. Close up the store before you leave, then maybe I can work in peace for a bit." Again the girl seemed to simply appear from nowhere, bowing deeply to the man. "Thank you, Shinji-sama. I'll make sure to get back as quickly as I can." He waved her away with a smirk. "Bah! Don't bother. If I know that old windbag you'll be there all afternoon, take the rest of the day off, and don't worry, you'll still get paid. It's ninja business, I understand well enough." The young girl gave a face-splitting grin before bowing once more, then rushing to get the weapons shop in order. The man giving another small nod to the older woman before disappearing in the back. Kurenai then turned to her student, watching with a small smile as the girl became a blur. "All right, Tenten, after this we need to grab Hinata then head to the tower. Maybe if we're lucky we can see that boy you like." Almost as though she had been suddenly nailed to the floor she froze. Kurenai-sensei? What did Naruto say his name was? Niji? She gave a slight blush. "Don't say such things, that was a long time ago. I don't like him that way anymore." She quirked an eyebrow, a sly smile taking over her features. "Oh, could there be another, say, blonder boy that you may like?" That only caused the brunette to frown, causing the teacher to quirk her eyebrow. "Naruto? No, I don't like him that way. We're not even really friends, just comrades." "That's rather cold." His words, not mine, though it could grow to friendship, in time. The crimson-eyed Jonin felt a bit of sympathy for the young girl. It was looking like this was going to be a long road. Just give it time, Tenten. Naruto's been alone for a long time. It's hard for some to understand that that doesn't have to be the case. Much to Kurenai's dismay, however, this only seemed to make the young weapon master flinch and stare at the doorknob for a long moment before slamming the key into the lock and turning it. "I know I'm one of the ones that ignored him, all because the other workers at the orphanage told us to avoid him, that he was dangerous." She gave a small laugh. Her eyes shadowed in memory, something that looked utterly wrong on one so young. "You know, I remember this one time when we were really little. He came running into the dormitories and said he'd found the best playhouse ever, wanted all of us to come and see it." Oh? That piqued her interest. She herself remembered what the blonde used to be like, not unlike how Anko would act before their own incidences changed everything. "Yeah, it was really hot that year and most of the time we were sent outside to play because of how rundown the place was. Naruto said the place was really cool, not that kinda cool, you know what I mean." She waved off her own comment, making the taller of the duo chuckle. "Anyway, A bunch of us were really looking forward to it. We started to chase after him. But all the helpers there got in the way and stopped us, said that his found building had to be unsafe for children. I remember one boy asking why they let Naruto go then. What did they say? They said that if we followed him that a demon would get us. Kurena's breath hitched, though it went unheard by Tenten as she was still lost in her memories. But the way they said it was almost like they though he was the demon, and that's just crazy. I mean, who would think that Naruto was some beast from the depths of the Makai? That set her to giggling, though she was a bit worried to see that Kurenai wasn't laughing in the slightest. Not at the ramen stand. Not at the dango cart. Not on the forest head. Not in the forest of death. Not at the academy. Not at his apartment. Not at the bar. Okay, that last one was just for her. It had been almost 2 hours already and still no blonde, and the most maddening thing was, the very first place she looked, the one most likely to have him, didn't seem to. Not at the tomb. Now she was starting to get a bit frantic. She had tried sensing with her chakra, but she was never really any good at that. She had tried the snakes and they just would lead her back to the tomb, usually after a massive trek around the city as they followed his seemingly meandering paths. She even tried asking the other genin and jonin, still no dice. Now she was starting to get worried, her mind flashing back to what the old man had told them of the person attacking others and draining them of their chakra, and there were very few in the village that could claim to have quite as much as the blonde teen. Still, she was certain that nothing serious had happened to him. She had a feeling they would have felt the backlash of such a thing. With little better to go by, she returned to the tomb, appearing in a swirl of leaves on one of the many trees in the area, watching the obscured tomb entrance one more. When in doubt, she had always somehow known he was inside, like there was some form of an odd tether, something connecting them. Come on, you little brat, where are we? The rustling of a bush. The slight shifting of grass. Dull thumps on the bark of the tree. Then the tickling of her legs as something moved up them, causing her to lash out with a kunai, her hand coming back with a familiar brown scorpion a bit larger than her hand, speared cleanly the thorax. Her eyes widened for a moment in shock before pulling the little creature from the blade. Her eyes narrowing as she saw that the scorpion had crumbled a bit as it came free, but she poked it. How can? The arachnid twitched, making her throw it away in shock as, with a flick of tail and claws, it flipped itself back over and seemed to look at her. 2 sharp snaps of its claws as it lowers its stance, its tail rising to a striking position at the two stared each other down. What the hell are you? Its answer was a snapping of claws. Clack, clack. Why, you're dead? Clack. The scorpion moved closer, making the purple-haired kunoichi take a sharp step back. Instantly it stopped, seeming to regard her with curiosity. What kind of jutsu is this? As she watched, the bug took several small steps back before turning, almost as though it was giving her one last look or trying to beckon her, before dashing down the tree once more, the shifting grasses letting her see that it was making a mad dash for the tomb. Naruto the scorpion seemed to pause at the entrance of the tomb, turning to look at her one more time before vanishing into the darkened depths. With a growl, she raked her finger through her hair before sending another glance at the stone structure, awe-screw it with several measured strides, unsure whether or not she really should be doing this. Not knowing what could be inside, she reached the stone archway and poked her head inside, her nose wrinkling at the stale air within. With a careful step, she moved over the tripwire, holding carefully mended blade in check, noting that, to a civilian, such a wire would have been almost unnoticeable. Inside, she couldn't help but notice the bizarre mural before seeing a dim, flickering light coming from deeper within. Damn it, Anko, you know better. You've seen enough movies to know not to come in here without enough explosive notes to level a village. Pulling a pair of kunai, she was quick to wrap one of the mentioned notes around the handle, while the other she used to cautiously peer around the corner, showing a well-lit room at the end of a hall. One with what looked to be a throne of some form. Using every ounce of stealth she possessed, she hugged the wall, crouching lower and taking careful steps, doing everything in her power to silence herself. She knew that if Naruto really was in here, then he would be none too happy with her intrusion, and worse, if someone else had entered and attacked him, that she would be in tight quarters. Something she didn't excel at fighting in. Orochimaru may have been a genius, but his taijutsu style, and hers by extension, needed a lot of room to move, something that even the great Sannin wouldn't forget, and made sure she didn't either. Finally reaching the larger room, she froze, her jaw hanging loose as she gazed upon not one, but 2 glittering chairs of gold and precious stones, both of them almost lovingly maintained to the point that the reddish gold shone like the sun in the firelight. The room carefully swept, and even the odd symbols on the wall looked to have been restored. However, it was the symbols on the things that really surprised her. The one on the right was made up of images not unlike those that Naruto bore on his armor and staff, while the other seemed to have a large number of snakes and scorpions. Naruto, what the hell is going on? Her ears twitched as she picked up the sound of legs skittering once more, her eyes drawn to another of the hallways to see the scorpion from before, the hole still clearly visible in its back as it scurried down one of the adjoining halls. Making a note to study the chairs more closely, she made to follow, making sure to tap the toes of her sandals together once, letting a small bit of chalk appear on the toe, something that had helped her in castles or other winding structures before. She made a tiny mark on the wall as she went, taking note just how much larger the structure was now that she was moving down, the hall having led to a small, almost laughably tight spiral staircase that, every dozen feet or so, seemed to take off in another hallway or series of rooms. Her only clue as to where she was going was the persistent sound of the tiny legs on stone below her. 5 times did she see such pathways before the staircase seemed to end, opening into a hallway wide enough for 10 men to stand abreast in, more of the odd torches lighting the path ever deeper. Though at her feet at the hall's entrance was the small scorpion, seemingly waiting on her. The Jonin dropped smoothly to one knee before the little creature. As she looked closer, the hole she had inflicted seemed to be closing up, the closer position letting her see that the very specks of sand seemed to be crawling up its body and merging into the shell, healing it. "Okay, little guy, you got me down here. Where's Naruto? Is he alright?" CL Clack. Fighting the urge to jump, the little creature quickly moved up her legs, across her body to finally come to rest on her shoulder, one of the pincers seeming to gesture for her to move on. "Right, you know that if you try anything or if this was some kinda trick that the last thing I will do is crush you into paste, right? Asterisk clack clack asterisk. Why do I have a feeling that I should be insulted? Clack. Okay, I'm going." Feeling, oddly, more confident with the scorpion resting on her shoulder, pressed on, another mark on wall as she moved, though she had felt a bit foolish. After all, it was a rather straightforward path. It took her 3 slow counts of 20 to reach the end, the space opening up into a massive chamber that, if anything, held more splendor than the one above. Firstly, flanking the entryway, were 2 utterly massive obsidian scorpions, both with their claws and tails drawn up close to their bodies, as though they were at rest. Each of the seemingly stone guardians were a true sight to behold, each of the great claws large enough to easily cut 3 men in half, the tail looking like it held the power to tear through the main gates like they were made of tissue paper. All along the whole of the thing seemed to be inlays of gold and turquoise, however. It was obvious that these statues were highly stylized. Where a true head for the thing would be was instead a carefully sculpted structure that looked disturbingly like a human skull, one with 4 eyes and large, fawn-like teeth that seemed to extend down the body a ways, giving it a disturbingly large-looking maw. The stinger getting a similar treatment in the form of a gaping human skull with a large blade coming from the mouth. However, as intimidating as these figures were, they paled in comparison to what they seemed to be guarding. There, extending further into the massive chamber, was what looked like a road flanked with columns, some extending clear into the darkened heights of the room for support, while others help at the apex what looked to be a vulture. However, they looked far too large, each able to hold a human head easily in one of its massive claws. The whole of the bodies wrapped and bandaged with a golden necklace of sorts, not unlike what Naruto's armor bore, around their necks. The things had their wings folded, like any bird that would sit atop its perch. Between each of the pillars lay row upon row of chariots, seemingly entombed with their riders' horses whole, the flesh long since fallen off the bone, but giving a stark example, as if the room above hadn't been enough, of the wealth that the builders possessed. Standing aside each of the chariots were even more warriors, many bearing shields and spears, behind them row upon row of archers. An army of the dead, one large enough to cause major trouble for any city if they were alive. Clack. Enko paled even as her eyes widened further. If something could make a dead scorpion move. A sharp pain shook her from her thoughts, making her glare at the scorpion that had pinched her, leaving a small cut in her skin. It looked to be pointing again. Following its claw, she noticed what looked to be a temple at the far end of the room, the structure gleaming pale white while the golds, blues and greens helped to carry the light. Though it was still very hard to see the ceiling. "Is he in there?" CL Clack. In the dimly lit room, it seemed to take her hours to reach the temple, the columns being far smaller than the main support ones that reached the ceiling, but that was made up for with the grandeur of the statues and reliefs she saw on the outside, many of them looking almost half-finished. The one face seemed to jump at her more than any other, that of the mask that Naruto had been wearing the past several days, the form of a woman with a serpentine staff with a long claw. As she reached out a hand to touch the face, she froze. An almost ghost-like flash of white suddenly flitted at the corner of her vision, then was suddenly gone. Naruto. She gave chase. Every time she rounded a corner she would see another teasing hit of the teen, turn after turn, so many she couldn't hope to have kept track, all leading her deeper and deeper into the temple. Her mind was so focused on catching the wayward teen that she utterly missed the little scorpion shifting its position on her shoulder, settling itself over the curse mark that showed her to be Orochimaru's former apprentice. Rounding one last corner she skidded to a sudden halt, her breath catching in her throat as she was face to mask with the one she had been chasing. At once she had leapt back, having almost colliding with the teen, who seemed to take a small hop back himself. "Cammy take you, you little shit! You scared the hell out of me. Where have you been?" The teen cocked his head slightly before gesturing around him. Oh haha, I'm going to grill your ass later about this thing, but for now the Hokage wants to see us. Get your shit and get moving. Again, the figure tilted his head even as Anko turned to leave. Now that is no way to speak of one who thinks so highly of you, Anko Midarashi. She froze in mid-step. That was not her blonde brat, that was the voice of a woman, a voice that carried a strange accent on slightly husky breaths. She stiffened as hands came around her midsection, one lightly rubbing her belly even as the other climbed higher, between the valley of her breasts to take hold of her chin, forcing her to turn her head to the side, just enough to see the mask, and that the slightly glowing violet eyes seemed to be looking at the juncture of her neck and shoulders, right where the scorpion was sitting. So this is the thing that gave him pause. There is something very special here, is there not? Anko grit her teeth as she fought the urge to lash out. She didn't know how, but she could almost feel the power radiating from the woman holding her. Add to that the scorpion that now had its stinger poised at her throat, and she was hardly in a position to do much. What do you want? The figure cocked its head once more. Want? I want my king to be happy. K-King? Of course, the god King Naruto, who has vowed to bring back my people. He knows about this blemish you carry, though he knows not how to deal with it. That is where I come in. And my curse seal? What can you do? No one in the village can help me. An almost lyrical tone echoed throughout the halls, her slightly higher giggle. Oh young Anko, you should know by now that you cannot truly say you are in your village at this time. The woman started to circle her, her hands skimming her form to take her by the shoulders before ghosting up and down her arms, sending a shiver through woman. We are as far beyond your people as yours would be beyond a tribal, though it may not seem as such here. We have been gone for a very long time. Where is Naruto? You keep saying he's the one who wants to help me, but where is he? Her smile could almost be seen through the mask. It came through so clearly in her voice. Lord Naruto is at rest, speaking with his priests about ways to help your home. You should thank him. He is as drawn to you as you are to him, and it is his will that has let you come this far. Though he does not know that we are speaking now, he wishes to keep me hidden away, thinking I am still so weak. Who are you? Now that would be telling. I will simply say that I am most precious to my lord, just as he is precious to me. Keep that little one with you. The more simple the creature, the easier it is to sense out the nature of your mark. No thoughts to get in the way. In time we will have the answers you seek. Though I will tell you now, what you bear is not what you think. It has so much more hidden within, and what hides it is not what the giver created. Someone has come after. As someone tampered with it? The masked woman seemed to frown. No, not tampered per se, it was hidden and hindered. I can tell it causes you pain, that is why. B. Ninja is what your kind are known as, yes? Do they not often hide things? Like with my king? She could only give a hesitant nod. The thought of someone doing something purposely, so above and beyond what Orochimaru had done. Who would? Why? What about Naruto? How's he involved? The woman seemed to pull back, having circled her several times, drifting back to sit slightly on one of the slabs. That is not for me to say. Our liege himself is still attempting to discern the reason. With that one's help, she pointed to the scorpion, we will know more. But why? Why does he want to help me? The woman brought a hand up to cover her mouth, an utterly feminine gesture she had seen Kurenai make 1,000 times before. As another giggle echoed through the temple. Is this so hard to understand? Anko could only look at her with almost hopeless confusion. You were kind to him when he was alone, even if it was only a presence. He needs no other reason. The weight of what she had said took several long moments to sink in, her knees starting to feel like jelly. First all the incredible things she had seen in here, then simply because she'd wanted to be around the kid. He had somehow found a way to help her to find those that could finally let her understand what had been done to her. It was unreal. And it all seemed to hinge on a tomb of all things. You are not looking well, young one. Perhaps you should rest. I think that's a good idea. Come, I will take you to him. He has need of rest as well, and it will give you time to speak, to just be. Who are you? She seemed to go silent for a time, as though trying to decide if she should say anything. I am known as Xandri, High Queen of the Deshret. If anything, the snake summoner's eyes grew wider still. Q Queen, but you said that Naruto was my king. Then you and him. She giggled once more. In a way, yes, though you should not worry. A king as virile as mine will be having many in his life. Perhaps that is what draws you to him, no? Anko could only stare at the woman's slack-jawed before it all became too much for her. She fainted. The queen's giggle became a solid, rolling laugh as with a gesture 2 skeletal warriors moved from the shadows. It seems young Anko here has had a bit too many surprises. Take her to our lord's chambers that she may rest. Wordlessly the two moved to easily lift her, the kunoichi seemingly weightless in their arms. Rest well, sister, we have much to discuss, you and I. What if Naruto is removed from the orphanage and finds Sage of 6 Paths Tomb Harem? And thanks for watching my video till the end. If you enjoyed this content, then do consider subscribing to my channel, and leave a like if you guys need the next part. Comment down, and thanks for watching the video, and see you guys in the next video.